Chapter 864, The Real Ruins of Immortality. Trying to make a fool of me, growled Meng Hao, killing intent flickering in his eyes. He kicked down viciously onto the man. Bones cracked and blood sprayed from his mouth. The man opened his mouth to speak, but a vicious look crossed Meng Hao's face and he punched down again. A boom echoed out, and the middle-aged man let out a miserable shriek, now broken and bleeding. Misunderstanding. Fellow Taoist Fang, this was just a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding my ass. Meng Hao leapt into the air and trampled down onto the man's face. A blood-curdling scream rang out. Soaked in blood, the man cradled his head as Meng Hao thrashed him. "Wanna buy my stuff? Buy it. Don't wanna buy it. You're gonna buy it anyway." Meng Hao grabbed the man's hair, lifted his head and slammed it into the ground. Before the man could scream, Meng Hao kicked down hard. A crack rang out and the man's leg shattered. The explosive violence and the rapid change in Meng Hao's expression left the surrounding onlookers staring in jaw-dropping shock. The audiences outside in the ninth mountain and sea gasped and stared blankly at the vortex screens, astonished by Meng Hao's savagery. This guy is definitely someone you can't provoke. What a brutal personality. He's definitely someone to avoid pissing off. I can't believe that a cultivator with a scholarly aura like that could have such a violent temper. The chosen from the various sects were also taken aback, none more than Sun Hai, who watched with wide eyes panting, as Fang Mu grabbed the man's hair. Trembling, he was struck by a memory he would never forget for the rest of his life, a completely humiliating one. This seems somewhat similar, but that's not him, is it? Sun Hai hesitated. The memory sent a tremor through him, a nightmare. Since returning to the Church of the Emperor Immortal, he had often been jolted out of meditation by it. He had even shaved his head and was now completely bald. Caption ID equals attachment backslash 72513. Align equals align center width equals 580. From now on, call me Lil Hai. Caption. In the starry sky palace, the patriarchs looked on in shock as Meng Hao beat the middle-aged man. Then they chuckled. This Fang Mu's personality is kind of amusing. He exacts revenge for the slightest offense and won't suffer any loss whatsoever. Truth be told, the other man started it. On the ancient road of Tao seeking, Ling Yunzi chuckled and shook his head, pretending he hadn't seen. The middle-aged man, dripping with blood, screamed and tried to fight back, but the more he struggled, the more ruthlessly Meng Hao beat him. Another crack rang out as another bone broke. The surrounding trial by fire competitors gasped, one after another, staring at Meng Hao with such terror that their scalps went numb. This guy seemed perfectly normal. How could he be so brutal? Must not provoke him, absolutely must not. Meng Hao's eyes flashed with killing intent, and he jabbed 2 fingers of his right hand toward the middle-aged man's eyes. The man shrieked and cried out, "Buy, I'll buy." The words floated into Meng Hao's ears like a melody of nature. His hand stopped, the vicious look vanishing, replaced by a bashful, embarrassed smile. He cleared his throat and then said, "Well, look at you, why didn't you speak up earlier?" He squatted down and, as the trembling man looked at him with terror in his eyes, helped him to his feet. "You don't need to help me up, really." Being helped up only frightened the man more, and he trembled violently. Before he could finish speaking, Meng Hao glared at him, and he didn't dare say another word. "This pill bottle is full of spirit-reviving pills," said Meng Hao. "Delivery fee included, 1 pill costs 200,000 spirit stones. There are a total of 15 pills, so that's a total of 3 million spirit stones." He placed the bottle in the man's hand and looked at him expectantly, eyes gleaming. The man was on the verge of tears. All he wanted now was to get Meng Hao to leave before things grew even more dangerous. "Okay, I'll buy them." The middle-aged man produced a vast quantity of spirit stones. Meng Hao's eyes gleamed at the huge amount of spirit stones still left in the man's bag of holding. He clearly had plenty left even after buying the pills. Meng Hao cursed having only 1 bottle of spirit-reviving pills on him. "Look, you're a customer, so I'm responsible for your safety," Meng Hao said solemnly. "Tell me who beat you up actually, never mind, that's not important. What matters is you're hurt and the arena matches begin in 2 days. Don't worry, fellow Taoist, I have more medicinal pills. These are top-notch injury-treating pills, only 200,000 per pill. I'm honest and fair with all customers." Meng Hao pulled out 7 or 8 pill bottles and handed them to the man. The man stared in shock, wanting to weep. For a moment he considered refusing, but Meng Hao's bashful smile set him shivering uncontrollably. Gritting his teeth, he bought every one of the pills. Meng Hao took a deep breath and stared at the man's bag of holding, eyes shining. Clearing his throat, he said, "Fellow Taoist, considering your injuries, I don't think those pills are enough. It seems even your nascent divinity was injured." "What?" The man's scalp went numb. His nascent divinity hadn't been injured, but from the look in Meng Hao's eyes, he knew it easily could be. The man scowled, his heart filled with regret. He was already running low on spirit stones. This was his life savings, including special rewards from his sect. "Fellow Taoist Fang, let me go, all right," he pleaded. "It really was my mistake." Of course, deep inside, his hatred burned, and he wanted to tear Meng Hao into pieces. Meng Hao smiled, but his eyes were completely cold as he said, "You know, the first person I ever killed was also surnamed Zhao." 1. Meng Hao killed a guy named Zhao Wuging in Chapter 9. The man trembled, a cold breeze seeming to fill his body. Gritting his teeth, he pulled out more spirit stones and bought Meng Hao's new pills. His bag of holding was now empty. Meng Hao nodded in satisfaction, then patted the man on the shoulder. "If you have any other needs, don't hesitate to call me over." The middle-aged man trembled and nodded. Meng Hao turned and stepped back into the void. The trip back to his position on the first altar took about an hour, during which the other trial by fire competitors clasped hands and bowed, making way for him, eyes filled with fear. Back on the first altar, Meng Hao sat cross-legged and took inventory of his gains. Looking at the accumulated spirit stones, he felt the trip hadn't been a waste. "It's too bad that warrior pavilion was so stingy, though," he thought. "All I did was take a few magical items, right? I didn't take the floor tiles or the shelving. I didn't even touch the decorative tiles. Back in the Bridge of Immortal Treading, I dug up all the floor tiles." Thinking about the warrior pavilion's stinginess, his hatred grew. There was nothing he hated more than stingy people. Well, in any case, small gains add up to a windfall. Keep at it long enough, and one of these days I'm going to be the richest person in all the 9 mountains and seas. Thinking about his grand aspirations, he took a deep breath, feeling one step closer to fulfilling his dream. "When I find Su Qing, the two of us will always have more than enough money to spend." He sighed emotionally. Time passed and the 3-day rest period ended. The trial by fire competitors opened their eyes, bright gleams in them. With Meng Hao there, most had no thought of trying to take first place. They just hoped to make it into the top 8. Ling Yunzi materialized out of the void and glanced over the crowds. "The arena matches will be held on the ancient Tao tree of the ruins of immortality. All of you must keep one point firmly in mind. The location of the Tao tree isn't the depths of the ruins of immortality, but it's still a place of extreme danger. Virtually anything could happen outside of the tree while you participate in the fighting. Remember, you must not, under any circumstances, leave the ancient Tao tree. Only by staying on the tree itself can you guarantee your safety. If you leave the tree, it is impossible to say whether you will survive or not." Ling Yunzi gazed sternly at the competitors, then waved his hand. A red glow sprang up everywhere and the void trembled. Ripples spread out as everyone present, Meng Hao included, flew up into the air. Ling Yunzi suddenly grew incredibly large, then swished his sleeve, pulling everyone inside. This scene caused Meng Hao's heart to tremble. "What an extraordinary divine ability," he thought, panting. Inside Ling Yunzi's sleeve, the trial by fire competitors could clearly see the outside world whizzing by, and knew Ling Yunzi was moving forward at incredible speed. The audiences in the outside world watched as similar scenes played out on the ancient roads of the nascent soul and spirit severing. The 2 old men in those locations also flew up, and soon joined Ling Yunzi as they flew off into the distance. The path they traveled was covered with mist, wails and howls and terrifying roars occasionally echoing through it. Gradually, an enormous head became visible, floating there in the mists, blood oozing out of its eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, an enormous centipede burrowing in and out of its eyes. When the crowds on the outside saw these things, they gasped and stared at the vortex screens in shock. Ruins of immortality. These are the real ruins of immortality. That giant's head is at least 10,000 meters tall. Inside of Ling Yunzi's sleeve, Meng Hao could see everything that was happening outside. He also saw the giant's head and couldn't help but feel shocked as they passed it by. More time passed. The mists grew thicker and the wailing undulated endlessly. Eventually, a huge vine appeared up ahead, swinging back and forth, countless corpses bound to it, ancient, shriveled corpses that still possessed magical items and treasures related to bags of holding. That the items still existed after all these years showed how incredibly mighty this vine was, and how little it tolerated incursion. Several days passed, during which time Meng Hao saw countless bizarre things. An enormous ball of fur the size of a planet, a gigantic bleeding eye, an army of cultivators in tattered clothes, walking slowly through the void with blank looks on their faces. Each of those cultivators was so powerful that Meng Hao found it difficult to breathe. Most shocking of all, though, was when Meng Hao saw a ship floating slowly through the mists. Meng Hao was not unfamiliar with this ship, and when he saw it, his mind trembled. This was the same ship he had seen in the Milky Way Sea, and just like before, an old man sat at the prow. Expand. 7 days went by. Ling Yunzi and the other two old men gradually decreased their speed, looks of concentration on their faces. Although they had made this trip on numerous occasions, every time they did, it was with the utmost caution. These were the ruins of immortality, not some other random location. Not every single step was filled with danger, but there were still many shocking things that could fill even them with a sense of deadly crisis. One misstep, and they might end up being buried in this place. Furthermore, this was a trial by fire, so if there were any accidents, they wouldn't be the only ones who died. Everyone stored inside their massive sleeves would go along with them. If that happened, it would be a huge blow to the entire Ninth Mountain and Sea. Ling Yunzi and the others stopped in place for a moment to perform some incantations of augury. Then they exchanged glances, and one of them commented, "Are the lives of the chosen from the great sects really that much more valuable than all the other lives?" Ling Yunzi shook his head and declined to answer. Whereas the three of them were personally escorting all of the trial by fire competitors, the chosen from the great sects would simply wait for them to arrive at the ancient Dao tree. There, a teleportation portal would be set up, and they could go to the place directly. The teleportation portal would only be able to remain active for the space of about 10 breaths of time, and could only handle a volume of about 100 people. Even that would require a huge expenditure of resources. That price would be split between the various sects, all to ensure that their chosen would reach their destination without any complication. "There are still 10 hours left before the entrance appears," said the old man who carried the spirit-severing competitors. "Why don't we rest for a bit?" With that, he sat down cross-legged. The one who had complained before was the old man carrying the nascent soul cultivators. He gave a cold harumph and looked off into the distance. "Let's bring the competitors out and let them take a look around," said Ling Yunzi. "This 10-hour period should be relatively safe." He swished his sleeve, and the 1,000 Dao-seeking cultivators, including Meng Hao, appeared. Many of them gasped as they were finally able to personally see the surroundings. Their minds were clearly shaken, but none of them spoke a single word. Moments later, the spirit-severing and nascent soul experts appeared in vast groups, looking around as sharp inhalations of breath rang out everywhere. "Do nothing rash and do not stray too far," Ling Yunzi said, his voice echoing about. "We are now in the real ruins of immortality, and there are many dangers lurking about. Considering the level of your cultivation bases, you would never normally be able to come to a place like this. Since you're here with us now, take a moment to experience what it feels like. You can consider this one of your rewards." Meng Hao took a deep breath and looked around. They were surrounded by mists, some thin, some thick, many areas radiating intense pressure. Clearly, there were different areas, some of which were possible for people of greater power to enter, other areas not so much. The area they occupied contained the weakest pressure of all, and the three old men were pushing back, reducing the power by at least half. Even so, it was still difficult for many of the competitors to hold up. Most of the nascent soul and spirit-severing cultivators were meditating cross-legged. Those not forced to focus fully on fighting back against the pressure were examining their surroundings. Among the Dao-seeking cultivators, about half were meditating, with the remaining several hundred moving about the area. Meng Hao walked ahead until he was about 300 meters out. There he stopped, sensing that the pressure would increase explosively if he proceeded any further. He stood there silently for a moment before smacking his bag of holding to produce a flying sword. He gradually extended it out, and when it went past the 300-meter mark, cracking sounds rang out. Fissures spread out across the sword, and after a few breaths of time, it disintegrated into ash. 5 breaths of time, he thought, his eyes glittering. The flying sword he had used just now was a spirit-severing treasure, and yet here it could only last for 5 breaths of time. Shaking his head, Meng Hao backed away from the 300-meter mark, when suddenly a voice echoed into his mind. "Come, come." He stopped in his tracks, his eyes beginning to shine with a brilliant light. As he looked out into the ruins of immortality, the voice continued to echo in his mind. He turned to look at the people behind him, but apparently, not even Ling Yunzi and the other two could hear what he was hearing. It seemed that only he could detect the voice. At the same time that the voice echoed out, the ancient demon sealing Jade in his bag of holding suddenly emanated flickering light. The demon sealing Jade had remained dormant for a very long time, but now it was glowing once again. However, unlike the previous occasions, it did not speak. The voice from moments before continued to speak. League of Demon Sealers, come here, come to me. As the voice spoke, the mist in front of Meng Hao seemed to weaken and change as a path appeared. Meng Hao's mind trembled as he looked at the path. He did not walk forward, but rather edged backward. He knew that the level of his cultivation base placed him at the peak of his peers. However, when you considered the mountain and sea realm as a whole, he was merely in the spirit realm, which made him very weak. This path might lead to good fortune, but considering the level of his cultivation base, that good fortune could very well lead to his death. In the moment that he stepped backward, the voice continued on with even more urgency. The League of Demon Sealers, I am a member too. Come to me, I shall give you good fortune. I shall give you destiny to step upon the heavens to achieve a meteoric rise. You can directly become immortal. The more the voice tried to persuade him, the more Meng Hao backed up. When he had backed up about 30 meters, the mist in front of him suddenly churned, as if some incredible power were approaching, heading directly toward Meng Hao. His face fell and he sped backward. By this time, Ling Yunzi and the others had sensed that something was happening. Faces flickering, the three of them sprung into action, pulling all of the trial by fire competitors back into their sleeves, and at the same time, striding forward to stand next to Meng Hao. By this point, the swirling mists had spread to reveal a figure. It was a cultivator whose body was in a state of decomposition. His head was half destroyed and his clothes were tattered. An archaic, rotting aura emanated out from him, and he was surrounded by swirling mists. In his hand, he held a tattered banner, and he stood there, staring listlessly at Ling Yunzi and the others with his one remaining eye. Ling Yunzi and the other old men stared at the man as if he were a deadly enemy. Their energy surged, and the light of magical techniques swirled around them. Senior, you have already perished, said Ling Yunzi. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We of the junior generation are still alive and are just passing through here. We disturbed your rest, please forgive us. Senior, kindly return from whence you came. The half-headed figure slowly raised his right hand and pointed a decomposing finger directly at Meng Hao. I want him. Ling Yunzi's face fell, as did those of the other two old men. Breathing heavily, Meng Hao backed up until he was behind the three old men. As he stared at the figure, his heart trembled. He noticed that the half-headed man had a sword stabbed into his waist. The sword was pitch black and emanated a freezing aura. However, Meng Hao could also tell that the sword possessed demon sealing power. It only took a moment for him to realize that it was the power of a demon sealing hex. The ancient demon sealing Jade in his bag of holding finally spoke into his mind with its archaic voice. Sixth demon sealing hex. Ling Yunzi placed his right hand onto his bag of holding. Senior, he said, please don't push us too far. The half-headed man suddenly looked over at him, and flames leapt up within his single remaining eye. He suddenly lurched forward, the mists surrounding him seething, as if they contained countless vengeful souls, screaming miserably. He waved the banner, and rumbling sounds rang out as mist poured toward the three old men. Ling Yunzi's face flickered, and he let out a roar, unhesitatingly slapping his bag of holding to produce a talisman. It was an ancient talisman that emanated a boundlessly archaic aura, as though it had existed through countless years of time. All it depicted was a simple, smiling face. However, as soon as it appeared, the half-headed man stopped in place, and even the incoming mist stopped, seemingly stuck permanently in place, not daring to get any closer. Ling Yunzi took a deep breath, performed an incantation gesture, and then pointed out. The talisman floated up into midair. At the same time, Ling Yunzi grabbed Meng Hao and shot backward at top speed. The other two old men also retreated, leaving the talisman floating there in the air. I can't believe we ran into a revenant here. That talisman should hold it in place for 20 hours. Ling Yunzi frowned and looked over at Meng Hao. How did you draw its attention? Meng Hao smiled wryly, unsure of exactly what to say. It probably has nothing to do with him, said the man carrying the spirit-severing cultivators, who happened to be from the immortal ancient Taoist rite. The revenants here usually just look for people they think will be suitable to help them to return to life. We've run into them before, haven't we? Meng Hao hesitated for a moment, then asked, Seniors, what is a revenant? Some ancient cultivators left strands of resentful will behind when they died. Those strands of will exist outside of the natural law of the mountain and sea realm and continuously attempt to return to life. Those are revenants. Meng Hao nodded and looked back at the half-headed man. He had a mind to go and try to retrieve the sword, but he knew that it was impossible to do so. Inwardly, he sighed with regret. Soon 10 hours had passed and the surrounding mists were churning. Meng Hao was back in Ling Yunzi's sleeve, and yet was still able to see the world outside. Shockingly, off in the distance, was an indescribably large corpse. It was so huge that Meng Hao could do nothing less than gasp. It seemed larger than a planet, seemingly without end. A cultivator who stood in front of it would be smaller than an ant. The corpse appeared to be almost like an enormous continent, hanging there in the void. As Ling Yunzi and the other two old men flew forward, they each produced a magical symbol that caused their bodies to emanate a gray light. They shot toward the huge body, and instantly touched down onto it and then sped forward. Meng Hao looked on gaping as Ling Yunzi and the other two continued onward for an entire month at an indescribable speed. Despite that, they still had not crossed the entirety of the corpse. Eventually, a tree appeared up ahead. It was a gargantuan, shocking ancient tree. Apparently, the tree was growing directly up from within the corpse, as if it were feeding off of its blood and flesh. The trunk of the tree stretched high up into the air, until, at a certain point, two huge branches split off in opposite directions, making it look like an enormous fork. The tree was covered with innumerable leaves, each one of which was fully 300 meters wide. The leaves did not bend downward, but spread out evenly like platforms. "We're here," said Ling Yunzi. He and the other two came to a stop, then waved their hands, causing all of the competitors to fly out from within their sleeves and land on the tree leaves. Chapter 865, Sixth Demon Sealing Hex. Chapter 866, I Am a God. The crowds in the ninth mountain and sea were watching on the vortex screens, and could see everything that Ling Yunzi and the others encountered. That included the decomposing, half-headed man, as well as all the other things lurking in the mists. Many gasps rang out from the cultivators in the ninth mountain and sea. For most of them, this was their first time ever seeing the ruins of immortality. In previous trials by fire, outsiders were not permitted to see these things, but this time was different. Not only were the prizes astonishing, but for the first time, everyone was able to catch a glimpse of the ruins of immortality. Although it was only a tiny portion, it was still enough to capture the attention of innumerable cultivators. When they saw the gigantic corpse, cries of shock echoed out in all directions. Then the ancient Dao tree appeared, and even greater shouts of astonishment rang out. "It's actually growing on the top of the giant's corpse." "That's the ancient Dao tree. What exactly is it? Why is it called a Dao tree?" "That corpse, heavens, I never imagined that things that huge existed. How is this possible? If that thing wasn't dead, who could possibly fight it? It's a real corpse." The faces of the patriarchs up in the starry sky palace were calm. All of them were familiar with the ruins of immortality. However, they were all wondering what motive the three great Taoist societies had to allow all the crowds on the outside to see. "A huge corpse, an ancient tree." "The tree leaves are the arenas," said Ling Yunzi. "The leaves on the left side will be the nascent soul battleground. The leaves on the right are for spirit severing. As for the central main trunk, that is where the Tao-seeking fights will take place." As his words echoed out, Meng Hao stood there on one of the leaves on the main trunk at the bottom level. All of the other Tao-seeking cultivators were also located on bottom-level leaves. When they looked up, they could see that the branches sticking out from it were arranged in layers, the highest of which was 10 levels away. The higher the level, the fewer the leaves. In fact, at the apex, there was only one golden leaf, which was completely eye-catching. As for the battlegrounds on the left and right, they were also arranged in levels, although instead of climbing straight up, they moved out to the side. Similarly, though, as they reached their ends, the leaves grew sparser, until at the very end of each was a golden leaf. 3 golden leaves. Those were the limits of the ancient Dao tree, and the locations where the final matches would be fought. Even as Ling Yunzi provided his explanation, he and the other two old men performed incantation gestures, and produced magical materials which they used to begin to set up teleportation portals on the giant's corpse beneath the tree. After the teleportation portals took shape, the three old men performed incantation gestures and pointed out, causing boundless light to shine up. Out in the sects of the ninth mountain and sea, as soon as the light from the teleportation portals rose up, Zhao Yifan, Taiyangzai, Fan Donger, and other chosen all stepped forward onto the teleportation portals at their locations. Light flashed, and they vanished. When they reappeared, they were standing atop the giant's corpse in the ruins of immortality. It only took the space of about 10 breaths of time for roughly 100 people from all the sects to arrive. Then, cracking sounds rang out as the teleportation portals shattered and faded away. As Fan Donger and the others spread out, they looked around with trembling minds. This was apparently their first time coming to this place as well. From the leaf he stood upon, Meng Hao could see Fan Donger, Taiyangzai, even Sun Hai and others. His eyes flickered and a smile appeared on his face. Ling Yunzi waved his sleeve, causing the nearly 100 chosen to fly out toward tree leaves according to the level of their cultivation base. Soon, Fan Donger and the others were standing on leaves on the lowest level of the tree. As for Fan Donger, she wore a white robe, and behind her swirled a globe of white mist, thick enough to hide what was inside. The leaf she stood upon wasn't very far away from Meng Hao, and he couldn't help but glance over at her. His eye was especially caught by the white mist behind her. Fan Donger noticed him looking at her, and frowned. However, she knew the two of them would soon be fellow disciples of the same sect, so she suppressed her anger and merely glared at him. Meng Hao quickly looked away, focusing his attention on Zhao Yifan, then Li Linger. When he looked at Li Linger, he subconsciously checked out her rear end. He could still remember how he had spanked her 2 times, leaving her buttocks uneven. Li Linger glanced at him coolly, then ignored him completely. Feeling somewhat pleased, Meng Hao then looked around until he noticed one particular young man who happened to be looking at him. When their gazes met, the young man trembled. He was, naturally, Sun Hai. Sun Hai didn't recognize Meng Hao, but for some reason, when Meng Hao looked at him, it filled him with a cold, unsettling feeling. At first, Meng Hao didn't recognize who the bald-headed youth was, but after a moment, his jaw almost dropped. What happened to all his hair, he thought. I seem to remember leaving quite a bit behind. It wasn't just Meng Hao who was sizing up these chosen. Many of the other competitors in the trial by fire were examining them closely too. Not much more time passed before Ling Yunzi's voice was heard once again. The arena matches of the nascent soul, spirit severing, and Tao seeking will be completely separate from each other and shall progress separately. The ancient Tao tree leaves upon which you stand contain a teleportation function. Not only will it teleport 2 people onto one leaf to fight, but it will also teleport the winner to the next level. The matches will proceed in this fashion all the way until the final battle. In the arena matches, life and death are determined by fate. Defeat will result in elimination from the competition. If you utter the words "I concede," then you will also be removed from the competition. Bear in mind that we are in the ruins of immortality and danger lurks everywhere. Even if some strange things appear on the outside, things which attempt to distract you or lure you out, you must under no circumstances leave the tree leaves. On the tree leaves you are safe. If you leave them, though, it is impossible to say whether you will make it back alive. And now, let the arena matches begin. The words left Ling Yunzi's mouth. Meng Hao suddenly cried out loudly. Patriarch, wait a moment. His voice echoed out, attracting quite a bit of attention. Ling Yunzi frowned and looked over at Meng Hao. At first he was tempted to ignore him, but after thinking about the expression on Meng Hao's face when he held the Feng Shui compass aloft, his heart softened. Yes, what is it? Patriarch, I wanted to know, the enormous corpse down there, is it a cultivator? Actually, Meng Hao wasn't the only person who wanted to know the answer to that question. All of the competitors were wondering the same thing. As for the newly arrived chosen, they remained silent. They had already asked about the subject when they were in the outside world. Ling Yunzi remained silent for a moment. He didn't have the sole authority to answer such a question. He looked over at the other 2 men, and all of them exchanged glances. Then, they produced jade slips which they used to communicate with their sect headquarters, inquiring as to whether they were permitted to respond. After a moment, Ling Yunzi put his jade slip away and looked back up at Meng Hao. This is a god of the Paramita. After uttering those words, Ling Yunzi didn't wait for anyone's reaction. He called out again, let the arena matches begin. Meng Hao's mind trembled, and he couldn't keep himself from taking in a deep breath in response to the answer he had just received. A god. Actually, all of the trial by fire participants were mentally shaken. However, even as this happened, the world in front of them distorted, and they grew blurry. Instantly, everyone grew clear again, and they were on the next level of leaves. However, instead of being alone on the leaves, each person was now facing an opponent. Meng Hao found himself looking at a young man who had originally been bursting with power. However, as soon as things grew clear and he saw that he was facing Meng Hao, his face fell. He was not one of the chosen from the outside sex, but rather one of the competitors from the trial by fire. Furthermore, he had been on the same altar as the middle-aged man upon whom Meng Hao had vented his anger earlier. He had personally witnessed the entire incident. Although he felt torn inwardly, his eyes quickly filled with a fierce light. He let out a powerful roar and employed the full power of his cultivation base as he turned into a prismatic beam of light that shot toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's face was calm as the young man closed in. He raised his right hand and punched out into the air, then spun and walked toward the edge of the arena. He turned, a huge boom rang out and blood sprayed from the young man's mouth. Although he had been approaching like a shooting star, in that instant, his light went dim, and he was forced back more than 30 meters, where he coughed up another mouthful of blood. His expression was now dismal, and his face ashen. He was well aware that Meng Hao had been holding back. The blow just now had been directed at the air in front of him, and had it landed on his body, he would not have gotten off as easily as being forced back a bit and only slightly injured. He took a deep breath, then looked sadly at Meng Hao, clasped hands and bowed deeply. "I concede," he said, sounding a bit bitter. As soon as the words left his mouth, he faded away, returning to the first level of leaves, which indicated that he had been eliminated. As for Meng Hao, he sat down cross-legged at the edge of the arena and looked around at the other matches that were taking place. He was feeling quite pleased with himself, but as for the cultivators from the 9th Mountain and Sea watching the arena matches, they were completely shaken by Meng Hao's power. One punch, into the air, and he injured a peak Dao-seeking cultivator. This Fang Mu hasn't even used any magical techniques. He's just relying on the strength of his fleshly body. No wonder he could stand up to the pressure outside those altars. Such fleshly body strength is extremely rare. The first round of the arena matches was a simple thing for Zhao Yifan, as well as the other chosen. None of them needed more than 10 breaths of time to secure victory. Meng Hao looked around at the other arena locations and identified about 10 other people besides the chosen who were worth paying attention to. Among those, one was the masked young man Li Yan. Another was the cultivator with the mosquitoes, and a third was a young boy who was also one of the trial by fire competitors. Although he never spoke, he had made it into the group of 1,000 Dao-seeking competitors and had his own unique capabilities. In the first round, he attacked viciously, the result being that his opponent was instantly reduced to a bloody pulp. The fourth person was a garrulous old man who constantly shivered and muttered to himself. His first opponent was a chosen from the 7 Seas sect. Strangely, as soon as he appeared in front of the mumbling old man, the chosen suddenly seemed to go crazy and tried to charge outside of the leaf arena. Were it not for Ling Yunzi intervening to save him, he would have been in great danger. Of those 4 people, the one who caused Meng Hao the greatest consternation was not the garrulous old man or Li Yan, but rather that unprepossessing young boy. He has at least 30% of the power of a true immortal, thought Meng Hao, looking at him closely. Almost in the exact instant that Meng Hao looked at him, the boy turned his head to return the gaze. Their eyes locked over all the various arenas between them, and the boy's mouth twisted into a vicious smile. Chapter 867, One Punch, 1. Since I'm sure there will be some comments, I'll explain about the one-punch thing. The 2 characters which make up this chapter name, Chinese letter, literally mean one fist. However, often this character of fist is used to describe the action of punching. A cursory search reveals that there seem to be 2 common Chinese translations of One Punch Man. One translation, Chinese letter, comes across as One Strike Man. The other, Chinese letter, One Punch Superman, or One Fist Superman, uses the same 2 characters as the title of this chapter. One Punch Man apparently rose to popularity in Japan starting around 2012, but the officially licensed Chinese translations didn't come out until late 2015, whereas this chapter was originally published in early 2015. I'll leave it up to you to decide if this is an intentional reference to Saitama. Although isn't it interesting that a bald character suddenly showed up in the last chapter? Other than those four, there were 6 chosen who Meng Hao hadn't seen on planet South Heaven when all the outside chosen came. 4 were men and 2 were women. One of the women wore a white mask and a long red robe. When she attacked, a blood orchid bloomed around her, indicating that she came from the Church of the Blood Orchid. The other woman wore garments of 5 colors and was not very pretty. She attacked with shocking 5 elements magic, and even though Meng Hao had previously cultivated a 5 elements nascent soul, he had the feeling that this woman's skill with the 5 elements exceeded his own. She was from the 5 colors sect. The other 4 cultivators were all young men. One of them did not personally attack his opponent, but rather caused a coffin to appear, from within which emerged a corpse. The corpse easily slaughtered the young man's opponent. He was from one of the 5 great holy lands, the Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum. The second young man was bony, with eyes that burned like fire. Like the other young man, he did not personally attack, but instead simply stared at his opponent, who then burst into flames and then transformed into nothing but ash. Third young man was handsome and, shockingly, had a third eye on his forehead. It was clearly a Dharma eye, and it remained closed the entire time. The young man wore a slight smile, and he seemed almost completely harmless, as if he lacked any ability to attack whatsoever. Furthermore, his opponent didn't attack either. The two of them transmitted a few words to each other, and then the opponent knelt down on one knee, looking at the young man with a pious expression, and conceded. This young man was from the Burning Incense Stick Society. The last person was a hulking man from the Kunlun Society. He was stalwart with a powerful fleshly body. He started his match standing there like a mountain. When his opponent attacked, he waved a finger, causing a huge mountain to descend, smashing into his opponent and instantly defeating him. However, he did not kill his opponent. When Meng Hao saw that, his eyes suddenly shone with the desire to do battle. As the intense fighting of the first round of arena matches played out, the audiences outside in the 9th mountain and sea closely watched the screens in the 3 vortexes. Each of those screens was divided into multiple smaller screens which depicted each of the battlegrounds. In the palace in the starry sky, the various patriarchs were closely observing to the goings-on, and were paying especially close attention to the chosen from their own sects. They were also watching the cultivators from the other sects. Although most of the chosen were not particularly powerful, they were the future blazing suns of the various sects. As long as they did not unexpectedly perish and could mature and grow stronger, they would eventually allow their sects to gain more power and influence. This generation has come across the fate of becoming a true immortal. In the 9 mountains and seas, every 10,000 years, the true immortality destiny descends, and an entire generation of chosen always comes out of the woodwork. I wonder which 3 will last until the end to take first place in their stage. Everyone was watching the fighting, hearts filled with anticipation. Back in the battleground, Meng Hao's expression was calm as he sat there cross-legged on the leaf. He looked around at the other arenas and could see many people looking back at him. After looking around for a while, Meng Hao had the mind to take a look at the nascent soul battles, but unfortunately, it was currently impossible to see the fighting taking place in the other 2 areas. Finally, he closed his eyes and waited for time to pass. On the nascent soul battleground, Chen Fan's expression was as gloomy as ever. His attacks appeared to be normal, but his opponent seemed to have been infected by his mood, and as such, was only able to fight with half of the power of his cultivation base. On the spirit-severing battleground, the fighting was equally intense. The first round of arena matches for the Tao-seeking stage was the first to end, after a total of 4 hours. Half of the competitors were eliminated, and the other half stood on their leaves on the second level, eyes flickering. The leaves beneath their feet shone with light that spread out to cover everyone and teleport them to the 3rd layer of leaves. When he reappeared amidst the flickering light, Meng Hao was facing an old man whose face was covered with dark blotches. Immediately, a murderous aura sprang up, along with shocking energy. The man held a cane in his hand, and as he walked forward, he suddenly realized he was facing Meng Hao, and his pupils constricted. Fang Mu, he thought, and his heart pounded with unease. He had never imagined that he would end up facing the mighty Fang Mu in the second round. His fleshly body is incredibly powerful and his divine sense is incredible. He has a profound cultivation base and attacks without mercy. Damn it, why did I have to end up facing him? Although I might not necessarily be unable to earn a victory, I excel in terms of speed. Eyes flickering, the old man turned into a blur as, all of a sudden, 9 clones appeared. The 9 clones closed in on Meng Hao, each one coming from a different direction. Meng Hao stood there, looking around coldly at the incoming figures. His expression was calm as he raised his right hand and once again released one punch. As soon as the punch landed on the ground, he turned and, just as he had in the last battle, walked to the edge of the arena. Behind him, massive booms rang out. His one punch caused a huge vortex to appear, which emanated a shocking gravitational force and intense rumbling. 10 figures were sucked toward the vortex. 9 of them collapsed into pieces, and the old man's true self coughed up blood. His expression was one of astonishment as he quickly called out that he conceded. As soon as the words left his mouth, he faded away to reappear back on the first level of leaves. He had been defeated. By that point, Meng Hao had reached the edge of the arena, where he sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. Many people in the outside world were paying attention to Meng Hao, and what they saw shocked them. One punch again. It was exactly the same as the first round, except that the old man's cultivation base was clearly much higher than the guy from the previous fight. This Fang Mu's fleshly body is so powerful that he can create a vacuum. Maybe his speed truly isn't that great, but he's so strong that he doesn't even need speed. Who could possibly fight back against that one punch? He's definitely going to get into the top 16. I can't wait to see him fight against some of those chosen. The outside world was in an uproar. It didn't take long for the second round of arena matches to end, and the third to begin. Meng Hao appeared on the next level of leaves, where he looked at the glittering lights in front of him and watched his opponent emerge. This person was no chosen. Instead, it was the young man with the mosquitoes. When he laid eyes on Meng Hao, instead of looking nervous like the previous 2 opponents, his eyes gleamed with the desire to do battle. "Fang Mu," he said, "it's my pleasure to be able to fight with you. Finally, I'll be able to see exactly how powerful you are." Meng Hao's expression was unchanged, completely emotionless. What he had been paying attention to this whole time was not the young man himself, but rather his mosquitoes. Before the young man even finished speaking, he waved his hand, causing a shocking cloud of fierce mosquitoes to appear. The largest were a meter long, and many were the size of a fist. They spread out in a great cloud as they shot toward Meng Hao. A buzzing sound rang out as they closed in. Meng Hao's eyes flickered as he clenched his fist and then punched out. Just like the previous matches, it was only one punch. Rumbling filled the air and ripples spread out in all directions. At the same time, Meng Hao turned and walked toward the edge of the arena. Behind him, the shocking ripples slammed into the mosquitoes, causing them to collapse into pieces. The young man's body vibrated uncontrollably as he shot backward. Blood sprayed from his mouth, and his expression was one of shock. He hadn't even been able to attack, and yet his cultivation base was suppressed, and he almost felt as if his vital organs were being tossed about. At the critical moment, even the young man's voice quavered as he cried out, "Concede! I concede." He looked over at Meng Hao with an unprecedented expression of fear. He had been aware that Meng Hao was powerful, but had never imagined that he was this powerful. As the scene played out in front of the eyes of the audience in the outside world, it sent them into tumult. In the first round, one punch. In the second round, also one punch. In the third round, facing up against a powerful opponent and also one punch. Just how powerful is he? He definitely deserves to take first place. With power and confidence like that, he's basically invincible. I'm guessing that only the chosen from the great sex can fight him. I wonder who will force him into using 2 punches. Up in the starry sky palace, the various patriarchs were nodding in approval. None of them had any reason to deny that among his generation, Meng Hao truly was incredibly powerful. He must be using a vibration magic. This Fang Mu isn't very old, but he's mastered the magic of vibration. 1. Meng Hao picked up the vibration magic from Guiding Trirane in chapter 644. He used it afterwards on a couple occasions. That's a fleshly body technique that can only be learned when the fleshly body has reached a certain level of power. It can be considered very strong within the spirit realm. In fact, even in the immortal realm, there are only a handful of people who have mastered it. Meng Hao's performance was flashy and eye-catching, making him the center of attention of everyone watching the arena matches. When it came to the chosen who were participating in the arena matches, they were also paying close attention to Meng Hao. Although their matches ended quickly, none of them were able to finish them with the ease that Meng Hao did. HMPH, he's just gotten lucky. How could he have run into so many weak opponents? If he had faced off against formidable adversaries like we did, there's no way he would have gotten off so easy. The further along we get, the more powerful the opponents will be. Let's see exactly how many rounds he can last. Discussions like these arose as the third round of matches concluded and the fourth round began. By now, most of the cultivators had been eliminated, and only about 100 remained. Each and every one was incredibly powerful. Meng Hao stood on the fifth level of leaves as another opponent appeared amidst glittering lights. It was a hulking man who wore a long robe. Ripples spread out as he materialized. This was not the powerful expert from the Kunlun Society, but was a chosen nonetheless. He came from the Seven Seas sect. In each of the previous rounds, he had torn his opponent to shreds. All of them had died. When he walked out into the arena, a cruel smile crossed his face, and his eyes shone with a vicious gleam. "Fang Mu," he said, "we meet at last. You made quite a show in the past few rounds, but that was only because the people you were up against were weaklings. This time I'll help you to understand how wide the gap is between a rogue cultivator like you and us chosen. That gap will leave you in despair." The man laughed uproariously and put on the appearance of being crude and rash. In truth, he was being very cautious and was careful not to let any of his scheming thoughts show on the surface. As he spoke, he charged forward, and illusory seawater appeared around him. 7 seas appeared, causing rumbling sounds to fill the air. Simultaneously, a huge sea dragon materialized and roared toward Meng Hao. As of this moment, many people among the audiences outside in the Ninth Mountain and Sea were watching Meng Hao in the arena. When they saw the chosen from the Seven Seas sect attacking Meng Hao, many of them sighed. Fang Mu will definitely be incapable of pulling off something amazing with a single punch like before. HMPH. Going up against weaklings makes it easy to seem powerful, but now that he's fighting a chosen, he'll have a tough time remaining calm. Even if he wins, this battle is definitely going to be like a fierce struggle between a tiger and a dragon. I've heard that the Seven Seas sect's Yun Tian has a bizarre energy. After combining that energy with the cultivation base, it creates a power that enables him to fight a false immortal without being at a disadvantage. The discussions in the outside world could not be heard in the arenas. At the same time, the hulking man from the Seven Seas sect let out a powerful roar as he closed in on Meng Hao. Meng Hao's expression was as calm as ever as, just the same as before, he punched one time. Chapter 868, Junior Blood Immortal. "Looking to die," said the hulking man with a malicious grin. He was clearly not pleased with Meng Hao's plan to end the fight with one punch. Sneering inwardly, he redoubled the power he was putting into his attack, and also unleashed a forbidden technique of his sect, which further increased its power by 30%. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to kill his opponent, and he seemed very excited at the prospect of ending the life of the first-place competitor, who was also a future conclave disciple of the Nine Seas God world. Killing someone in an arena match was nothing anyone could complain about, so there was little danger of repercussions. His sect would reward him, and even more importantly, protect him. What he saw was a chance to make great advancement with little effort, right there in front of him. "Die," he roared, his eyes bursting with a murderous look as he caused the Seven Seas dragon to suddenly grow another vicious head, which also snapped toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's fist connected with the dragon. It was only one punch, but that punch slammed into the dragon with an enormous boom. A violent tremor ran through it, and then its first head cracked and exploded. The second head also exploded and then, bit by bit, its body. The Seven Seas rumbled briefly and then collapsed, vanishing instantly as if they had never been there to begin with. At this point, Meng Hao's fist slammed into the hulking man's chest. The big man's eyes went wide as he looked at Meng Hao, and his face twisted. Meng Hao's expression was calm as he pulled his hand back and walked off to the edge of the arena. In the instant he turned, blood sprayed from the hulking man's mouth. Fissures spread out from the point of impact on his chest, and instantly they had covered his entire body. A look of disbelief crossed his face, and he opened his mouth to say something. Before any words could come out, though, he exploded. As the haze of blood and gore blasted out, Meng Hao reached the edge of the arena and sat down cross-legged. The entire time, only one placid expression crossed his face. He reached up to wipe a drop of blood off of his cheek, then closed his eyes. Gasps rang out from the audiences outside in the Ninth Mountain, and see as they watched Meng Hao in terrified shock. That was still just one punch. Heavens, just exactly how powerful is this Fang Mu? That chosen from the Seven Seas sect could match up to a false immortal, and yet he collapsed from a single punch. Fang Mu hasn't even punched 2 times yet. 4 matches and he only punched 1 time each. Fang Mu is way too powerful. He's already in the top 100, with only 4 punches. Even the eyes of the patriarchs in the Starry Sky Palace went wide. Meng Hao was the focus of the attention of all the chosen from the various sects, and was now viewed by most of them as a major adversary. Even Zhao Yifan was wondering whether or not he could beat the 7 Seas sect's chosen with only 1 punch. Of course, if he used a sword, he was confident he could. Rumbling booms continued to echo out as the 4th round of arena matches proceeded. There was another battle that was particularly eye-catching. In fact, after Meng Hao's match ended, most eyes among the audiences in the 9th Mountain and Sea turned to watch it. That battle was the match being fought by a disciple from the Holy Land of Mount Sun, the illustrious Xianxia. His body was surrounded by boundless light, making him look almost like a sun. His opponent was a boy, the same competitor Meng Hao had noticed earlier and had been paying special attention to. From what Meng Hao could tell, he possessed at least 30% of the power of a true immortal. When the battle started, most of the spectators were confident that Xianxia would come out victorious. And yet, contrary to all speculations, he lost. Furthermore, it was an incredible defeat. If he hadn't uttered the words, "I concede," then he would almost certainly have died. The boy's magic caused a bloody glow to emanate out, and it seemed incredibly bloodthirsty. The sight of it caused quite a stir among the crowds, and many of the cultivators participating in the arena matches were shocked. Junior Blood Immortal. That was one of the names that came up in the trial by fire. He defeated Xianxia. He's making his rise to the top. While the outside audiences were discussing the matter, Meng Hao looked over at the boy to find him looking back with killing intent flickering in his eyes. 2 hours later, the 4th round of matches ended. There were now only a bit over 60 people left in the competition. The next round would determine the top 32. From more than 1,000 people, 32 would move on. One could imagine that even if there were a weak person among that number who had happened to overcome more powerful people by chance, then that luck could be considered an aspect of their power. The top 32 are about to be determined. Even some of the top chosen from the great sects were defeated in the previous fights. I wonder who will make it to the top 32. While the outside audiences buzzed, Ling Yunzi stood below the ancient Dao tree and glanced over the more than 60 competitors who remained. In the Dao-seeking arena matches, he announced, the most powerful people will form the top 32. Unfortunately, you have 3 too many people to make all the matches even. Therefore, some of you will be fighting more than one battle to make it into the top 32. As for who those people are, only the heavens know. It will all be up to the Dao tree's teleportation. You will have 4 hours to rest, after which the battles to determine the top 32 will begin. During those 4 hours, Meng Hao sat there cross-legged, meditating. He could sense that there were many people watching him, but he didn't open his eyes. Considering the level of his cultivation base, he was clearly at the pinnacle of the competitors in the arena matches. Were it not for the immortal jades and the precious treasures, he would never have participated. However, now that he was here, there were a few people who had attracted his interest. Unfortunately, he had yet to face them as opponents. 4 hours later, glittering light covered the leaves of the Dao tree, teleporting Meng Hao and all the remaining contestants up to the next level of leaves. From within the glittering light in front of Meng Hao, a young woman stepped out. She wore a blood-colored robe and a white mask. This was the chosen from the Church of the Blood Orchid, and as soon as she caught sight of Meng Hao, she stopped in her tracks. However, it took only a moment for her to emanate a powerful will to fight. The intensity of that will caused Meng Hao's eyes to shine with a fierce glow. "Fellow Taoist Fang," she said, her words echoing out coldly from behind her mask, "please give me some fighting tips." Even as she spoke, she performed an incantation gesture with her right hand, causing a blood orchid to appear in front of her. As the flower swayed back and forth, it grew rapidly. Rumbling sounds rang out as it instantly grew to a size of 30 meters. It had a thick trunk, blood-colored petals, and looked both extremely imposing and visually stunning. At the same time, the flower twitched, causing branches to shoot toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao stepped forward, clenched his fist, and sent out a single punch. As of this moment, everyone in the outside world was watching as the punch caused a huge vortex to appear. Rumbling sounds spread out, causing the air to vibrate and everything else to shake violently. The incoming blood orchid branches twisted and then completely collapsed. However, in that moment, the blood orchid's petals spread wide as it bloomed. A drop of blood emerged that flew back to land on the forehead of the young woman's mask. Radiating an intense aura, the young woman then flickered as she shot toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao stood in place, neither retreating nor advancing. However, at the same time, he punched a second time. This second punch caused the air to ripple, and a massive force to explode out and sweep across the young woman. Her body trembled, and she was about to unleash a divine ability when an intense pressure crushed down onto her cultivation base. Instantly, she completely lost any ability to rotate her cultivation base, which left her not only surprised, but also incapable of avoiding the punch that slammed into her. A boom rang out. Beneath the mask, blood spurted from the young woman's mouth, and she staggered backward a full 30 meters, after which she looked up at Meng Hao, panting. "You're no match for me," Meng Hao said coolly. The young woman was silent for a moment, after which she chuckled bitterly and nodded. "I concede," she said, and then vanished. When she reappeared, she was back on the first layer of leaves. Meng Hao had won once again, but before the audiences outside could comment, light glittered on the tree leaf again, and another person emerged. It was a boy, none other than the same boy who had just defeated Xianxia, Junior Blood Immortal. His appearance on the scene instantly sent the audience into tumult. Fang Mu is one of the people who has to fight twice. There were 3 extra people in the competition, so some people have to fight more than once to get into the top 32. I never thought that Fang Mu would be one of them. This is going to be one intense battle. Fang Mu versus Junior Blood Immortal. I wonder who will be strongest. Junior Blood Immortal emerged slowly, and when he saw Meng Hao, his mouth twisted into a vicious grin. Killing intent flickered in his eyes. "So we meet at last," he said in a raspy voice, licking his lips. A shocking red glow showed in his eyes as he stared at Meng Hao. Meng Hao looked the boy over. He knew that he attacked with bizarre ferocity and had reduced all of his opponents to pools of putrid blood, with the exception of Taeyangzai. Contrary to what one might expect, the boy had not made much of an impression during the 10 stages of the trial by fire. He had achieved just enough to make it into the top 1,000. Clearly, he had been holding back in virtually all aspects. Meng Hao's expression was calm, and he said nothing. He merely looked indifferently at the boy. And their gazes met. Roaring sounds filled both of their minds as their divine senses made contact with each other. The boy's eyes filled with surprise. He knew his opponent was powerful, and yet still remained fully confident in himself. Taking advantage of the rumbling caused by the divine sense, he charged toward Meng Hao, raising his right hand to perform an incantation gesture. Bloody light flickered up, and instantly a blood-colored bottle gourd appeared, rotating as it sped through the air toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's expression was unchanged as he took a step forward. In that instant, the entire arena match leaf quaked, and a wind swirled around Meng Hao. "This divine ability of mine will cause all of the blood in your body to boil and turn into a putrid sludge." The Junior Blood Immortal's voice was now shrill as he called out. Instantly, the blood-colored bottle gourd exerted an incredible gravitational force, as if it wanted to suck Meng Hao inside of it. Meng Hao snorted coldly. He did not level any punches. This Junior Blood Immortal had a bizarre cultivation base, and Meng Hao would not take him lightly. The wind swirling around him quickly transformed into a violent tempest that shot forward. At the same time, his body transformed into a black vulture, which flapped its wings, charging through the gravitational force to appear directly in front of the boy, where it slashed out with claws vicious enough to shatter stone and metal. Chapter 869, Top 32. The boy's expression flickered, and blue veins popped out on his forehead as he howled at the incoming vulture. Sound waves rippled out that seemed to wish to shatter the air. The boy's expression was vicious as he raised both hands up, causing a sea of blood to appear and surge out toward Meng Hao. Booms rang out as the two of them fought back and forth in midair. At one point, the boy let out a shrill cry, causing the sea of blood to turn into a blood-colored vortex that tried to suck Meng Hao in. Meng Hao waved his hand, causing numerous mountains to appear, which then linked together to form a mountain range. However, thanks to the black feather, that mountain range looked like a huge river, which then surged in counterattack against the blood-colored vortex. The vortex was crushed as easily as dried twigs, shattering into pieces as vulture form Meng Hao once again slashed through the air, his claws extended toward the boy's torso. Boom! Blood sprayed from the boy's mouth as a huge hole was ripped into his chest. He shot backward in retreat, biting the tip of his tongue and spitting out some blood, which twisted in the air to become 10 blood drops. Each drop expanded, turning into 10 seas of blood that spread out to cover everything. 10 seas blood slaughter, roared the boy. Meng Hao's face was calm and he didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced, an aura of invincibility exploding out of him. As he faced the 10 seas of blood, he clenched his hand into a fist and punched out into the air. Then he punched again. 2 mere punches did not seem capable of fighting back against the 10 roaring seas of blood. However, the boy's face flickered as he realized that something didn't seem quite right about the 2 blows, although he wasn't sure what. Instantly, and before he had any time to react, Meng Hao attacked a total of 9 times. He didn't even seem to be paying attention to the seas of blood that surrounded him, but instead was punching directly forward. 9 punches, each one more shocking than the one before. This was a Taoist magic, 9 heavens destruction. 1. Meng Hao got the 9 heavens destruction in the demon immortal pagoda in chapter 585. He used it a few times after that, mostly when he was in the Milky Way Sea, and once when he went to the Black Sieve sect after they took Su Qing. As soon as the 9th punch exploded out, the boy's face fell. His pupils constricted as he retreated at top speed. At the same time, a massive boom echoed out, so powerful that cultivators in the surrounding arena matches heard it and were shocked. A gigantic vortex surged out as a result of the 9 punches. The blood seas were incapable of doing anything except be sucked up by the vortex. As for Meng Hao, he stood next to the vortex, his expression cold as he watched the boy fleeing. Then he raised his hand and stretched it out in a grasping motion. Star-plucking magic. Boom! Blood sprayed from the boy's mouth. An expression of astonishment covered his face as he was dragged back toward Meng Hao, his body completely beyond his own control. Instantly, he was directly in front of Meng Hao and was close enough that he could even see the cold look in Meng Hao's eyes. "You're looking to die," howled the boy, his eyes bright red. Suddenly, his skin turned crimson and black mist floated up from the top of his head. Shockingly, an enormous image formed above him. It was a gigantic leech, covered with scales that emanated an intense pressure. As soon as the cultivators of the 9th mountain and sea saw it, their faces flickered with shock. Blood leech grand magic. That's a forbidden magic. That boy's using a forbidden magic. In the starry sky palace, the various patriarchs were looking on with strange gleams in their eyes. That boy has remained undercover this entire time. Considering he cultivates a vicious magic like that, it's little wonder he could defeat Taiyang Zai. However, Saint Blood Leech was exterminated years ago by the 3 great Taoist societies. Even if some of his divine clones survived, they wouldn't be able to do this alone. It seems this boy must have gotten his hands on one of them. Although it's only the first form of the Blood Leech grand magic, Fang Mu is still in grave danger. According to legend, the only thing that can restrain this magic is the Tao of the Blood Demon. Either that, or an incredibly powerful cultivation base. Back in the arena, a vicious expression appeared on the boy's face. This was his trump card, which he had intended to save for someone in the top 4. However, he was now forced into a corner and had no other choice. His desire to kill Meng Hao now grew even stronger. "Killing you won't be a waste of my grand magic," said the boy with a hideous grin. "Considering your reputation, slaying you will make me famous." The enormous illusory blood leech opened its mouth, revealing countless sharp teeth as it pounced toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao frowned slightly. This leech left him feeling as if his blood were unstable and that it would burst out from inside of him at any moment. He snorted coldly, and rumbling filled the air as his Dharma idol appeared behind him. Because of the transformative powers of the black feather, the Dharma idol now looked exactly like Fang Mu. It was 300 meters tall and emanated boundless magical light. As soon as it appeared, it stepped forward and punched toward the enormous leech. A boom rang out and the boy's face fell. Blood spurted out all over his body as he tumbled backward. The enormous illusory leech trembled, seemingly on the verge of collapsing to pieces. "I refuse to back down. Fang Mu, die," the boy howled as countless rips and tears appeared all over his body. At the same time, the image of the leech shattered, transforming into innumerable fragments that shot toward the boy and fused into him. In the next moment, the boy suddenly exploded. In that moment of explosion, the boy's flesh and blood transformed into numerous blood-colored leeches, a vast cloud of nearly 1,000. Buzzing rang out as they shot toward Meng Hao. In addition to the leeches, a bloody mist spread out in all directions, making it impossible for onlookers to see what was happening clearly. This new development caused great shock among the onlookers in the outside world. Even the patriarchs in the Starry Sky Palace were surprised. The second form. "I can't believe this boy has cultivated the blood leech grand magic all the way to the second form." Not even the patriarchs in the Starry Sky Palace could see what was happening inside the red mist. Were this some other location, nothing could block their divine sense. However, these were the ruins of immortality, so they could only watch with their eyes, not with their divine sense. Even Ling Yunzi and the other two old men couldn't do anything but watch. Their faces flickered as they considered the danger Meng Hao was in. The outside world was in tumult. Don't tell me Fang Mu is going to perish. What the people on the outside couldn't see was that Meng Hao was standing in the middle of the bloody mist, his body glowing with red light as he stared coldly at the more than 1,000 incoming blood leeches. The leeches were now trembling in terror. The boy's quivering divine sense emanated out from the leeches. Blood demon grand magic, spare me fellow Taoist Fang, spare me. Meng Hao ignored him. After sweeping his own divine sense across the leeches, he exercised a bit of will, and booms rang out as one leech after another exploded. All of them transformed into nothing more than drifting ash. As the bloody mist faded away, Meng Hao walked calmly over to the edge of the arena and sat down cross-legged. The outside world was in an uproar. That boy's grand magic was defeated. There were clearly more than 1,000 leeches just a moment ago. Then that red mist covered everything over, and we couldn't see anything. How exactly did Fang Mu secure victory? Junior Blood Immortal defeated Taeyang Zai, and then Fang Mu defeated Junior Blood Immortal. Fang Mu is invincible. The outside crowds were astonished, and the patriarchs inside the palace were frowning. They were all looking at Meng Hao with thoughtful expressions. They had been unable to see what had happened inside the red mist, but they knew that the second form of the blood leech grand magic was incredibly difficult to deal with. The fact that it had been defeated so quickly was quite puzzling to them. As everyone pondered these matters, the old man from the immortal ancient Taoist rite spoke up. Perhaps the boy's version of the second form wasn't stable, and he accidentally self-destructed, he said slowly, his voice echoing about. This was the only answer that made sense. After all, the second form of the blood leech grand magic was very difficult to cultivate successfully. Back in the arena, Meng Hao sat there calmly. His battle with the boy just now had caused quite a bit of shock amongst the other competitors, especially the Chosen. The boy had just defeated Taeyang Zai, so the fact that Meng Hao had ended up killing him caused even more attention to be sent his way. The Chosen had been quite shocked just to see the blood leech grand magic. What had played out after that left them filled with a sense of mystery. Zhao Yifan's eyes flickered, and his desire to fight grew stronger as he looked over at Meng Hao. He said nothing, but the look flickering in his eyes grew even more intense. Fan Donger frowned. On the one hand, she felt some mysterious and unexplainable loathing toward Meng Hao, but on the other hand, she had to admit that he was definitely on her level. Li Linger and Sun Hai also looked over at him. Compared to Li Linger, Sun Hai's feelings were far more intense. To him, looking at Meng Hao kept causing him to think about his nightmarish experience on planet South Heaven. The other matches proceeded along. Now that Meng Hao's battle was over, there was another intense match that drew quite a bit of attention. That was the masked young man, Li Yan, who was fighting the emaciated youth from the bones of the Flame Devil. The youth attacked with a monstrous sea of flames, and fire burned within his eyes. As for Li Yan, the fighting had reached the point where he had finally removed his mask, revealing a scar-covered face and eyes that brimmed with the desire to do battle. They fought with shocking attacks until Li Yan finally ran out of power. However, the Chosen from the bones of the Flame Devil was also seriously injured. Because of Li Yan's defeat, Meng Hao now had a much better idea of exactly how powerful he was. The crowds in the Ninth Mountain and Sea were sighing. What a pity. It seems Li Yan isn't strong enough to make it into the top 32. However, this was a battle against Chen Hao from the bones of the Flame Devil, and he's incredible. Even though Li Yan lost, he still managed to seriously injure Chen Hao. You can only chalk it up to bad luck. At least he can feel proud in defeat. I wonder how many competitors from the trial by fire will be left in the end. Will the first place spot for the stages of the nascent soul, spirit severing, and Tao seeking belong to them, or to the Chosen? In the palace among the stars, the patriarchs were watching the various battles thoughtfully, but their expressions revealed nothing about what they were thinking. In contrast, bets were already being placed in the outside world regarding who would make it into the top 8. Soon, this round of matches was over. The extra 3 people were eliminated, along with half of the other participants, leaving 32 competitors behind. These 32 were incredibly powerful cultivators. Chapter 870, The Fiends Descend. Spend the next day in rest and recovery, said Ling Yunzi. After that, the top 16 will be selected. Meng Hao and the others among the top 32 were now getting ever closer to the top of the main trunk of the ancient Dao tree. They rested and prepared for the battles to get into the top 16. By now, the battles to select the top 32 had already begun for the nascent soul and spirit severing stages. From Meng Hao's position up above, he could finally see Chen Fan down in the nascent soul arena matches. Although Chen Fan was currently fighting against a nascent soul cultivator like himself, the level of difficulty to get into the top 32 was extreme. Nevertheless, he was still enduring. His sword strikes had gained an additional sharpness which, combined with his gloomy demeanor, caused shock to fill the heart of his opponent. Chen Fan had long since drawn the notice of quite a few sects. His sword contained a domain, even though he himself was only in the nascent soul stage. Someone like that was certain to make stunning accomplishments in the future. One of the 3 churches and 6 sects, the Solitary Sword Pavilion, which was somewhat related to the Solitary Sword sect, was especially interested in Chen Fan. They were the first to take note of him. The day passed by quickly, and in the end, Chen Fan made it into the top 32. As for Meng Hao, he fought for his spot in the top 16. As the battle began, glittering lights spread out, and they moved closer to the top of the tree. Meng Hao's opponent was another chosen. It was the young woman from the 5 Colors sect, who wore robes that were a mixture of 5 colors. Meng Hao had been paying attention to her in previous battles, and knew that she had astonishing skill in 5 elements magic. This young woman was much more cautious than Meng Hao. Once she saw who her opponent was, her heart thumped. Of the handful of people she truly feared in the arena matches, Meng Hao was one of them. After she and Meng Hao clasped hands to each other, the young woman took the initiative, performing a double-handed incantation, unleashing metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, all 5 elements. They materialized into a massive sea, a huge battleship, a blazing sun, and an enormous clay golem that wielded a golden greatsword, all of which shot toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's eyes gleamed with the light of anticipation. Body flickering, he waved his hand, causing a violet sea to descend, which was his water totem. Then the golden crow appeared, his metal totem. After that were his wood, fire, and earth totems. Shockingly, 5 elements fought against 5 elements. The clash caused wild colors to flash about, and rumbling to fill the air. The audiences in the outside world were looking on with rapt attention. In the arena, Meng Hao and the young woman fought back and forth in midair. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, the 5 elements were unleashed amidst rumbling booms. In a short time, they had exchanged several dozen attacks, but throughout it all Meng Hao never went all out. Rather, he merely relied on the 5 elements as the avenue of attack while facing off against the woman. He was using this fight to strengthen his 5 elements magic. Considering that the young woman was even more skilled than Meng Hao in the use of the 5 elements, this match gave those watching it the feeling that it was 2 disciples from the 5 Colors sect who were fighting. In fact, the disciples from that very sect were somewhat confused, and watched in shock as the battle unfolded. Fang Mu excels in 5 elements magic as well. This is unbelievable. Although many people can use 5 elements magic to some degree, no one can compare to the 5 Colors sect. And yet, Fang Mu is evenly matched with Han Mei. There were 16 arenas with 32 people fighting in them. No one had secured victory as of yet. A black wind rose up within the ruins of immortality. Not even the enormous corpse beneath the ancient Dao tree could do anything to prevent its arrival. It swept out, appearing directly above the huge tree. Inside of the black wind, a pair of white eyes appeared, which stared down at the crowds of people fighting down below. The instant the black wind appeared, the faces of Ling Yunzi and the other 2 old men flickered. It wasn't just them. The crowds out in the 9th mountain and sea were also shocked. Most nervous of all were the patriarchs in the Starry Sky Palace. They all rose to their feet, even the old men from the 3 great Taoist societies, their eyes widening in response to the sudden appearance of the black wind. The ancient Dao tree was personally planted by the paragons, and contains a bit of the paragons' will, said the patriarch from the 9 Seas God world. They will be safe as long as they stay on the tree. By now, all of the fighters on the Dao tree had seen the black wind, and their faces flickered. Ling Yunzi and the other 2 old men took deep breaths, and then Ling Yunzi's voice rang out. You must not leave the leaves of the tree. As long as you remain on the leaves, you will be in no danger. Ling Yunzi's words rang out. A scream rang out from off in the distance, a sound so piercing it seemed capable of shredding iron or rock. It echoed about, and to the people on the tree it merely gave them a twinge of pain in their ears, inflicting not even a minor hindrance to them. However, Ling Yunzi and the other two old men coughed up blood and, faces falling, quickly retreated as close as possible to the tree. In that same moment, an enormous eyeball descended from up above. It was thoroughly bloodshot, and as it neared, the veins of blood within the eye extended themselves and whipped around. Suddenly, a shrill voice echoed out. Who plucked out my right eye? My right eye, get back here, come back. As the sound echoed about, the crowds on the Dao tree coughed up blood. Thankfully, a bright glow spread out from the Dao tree, ensuring that there were no deaths, only injuries. The black wind in the eye merely milled about outside the Dao tree, apparently in dread of it. However, after a moment the black wind seemed to lose patience. A shrill shriek rang out as an enormous, decomposing rock flew out from inside. It was shockingly large, and as it flew out, its sharp talons slashed out toward the Dao tree. Before it could get very close, brilliant light spread out from the Dao tree, causing the rock to let out a miserable shriek and fall back. However, it did not leave. Instead, it continued to loiter outside of the Dao tree, its eyes radiating an intense aura of death and savagery. Considering that was all that happened, Meng Hao, although shocked, didn't pay very close attention to the matter. However, just when he was about to resume fighting with the young woman, another figure approached from off in the distance. It was a man with half a head, his body surrounded by swirling black mist. He held a banner in his hand, and a sword had been plunged into his side. The grievous wound that had taken off half of his head did not appear to have been inflicted while alive, but rather as if some creature had bitten it off after he was already dead. Instead, the fatal blow that killed him was apparently delivered by the sword that was still stuck into his side. He approached slowly, his one remaining eye sweeping over the crowds until it finally came to rest on Meng Hao. Then, he headed directly toward him. When Ling Yunzi and the others saw the man, their faces fell. Meng Hao's eyes flickered. The young woman from the Five Colors sect suddenly performed an incantation gesture and attacked. Her five elements magic caused five-colored light to blaze up, transforming into a five-colored sealing mark that rotated rapidly as it shot through the air toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao frowned. He was no longer interested in fighting, so he punched out with his right hand, simultaneously causing his Dharma idol to appear. Intense energy surged out, and a boom rang out as the five-colored sealing mark shattered. The young woman's face fell, and blood spurted from her mouth. It was in this moment that the half-headed man waved his right hand, causing the banner in his hand to unfurl. A black mist appeared, which transformed into a huge vortex. At the same time, he pointed toward Meng Hao. Come, come, come. His voice was archaic as if it had originated in ancient times. As the voice echoed out, an enormous gravitational force exploded out and enveloped the tree leaf Meng Hao was on. Meng Hao's face flickered, and he dropped to the surface of the leaf. However, the face of the young woman from the Five Colors sect fell as she was involuntarily swept up into the air. Instantly, she appeared to be on the verge of, flying completely away from the leaf. Everyone looked on as it happened, but none of them were able to do anything to come to her aid. Ling Yunzi and the others stared with wide eyes, but could do nothing to help. The crowds watching in the Ninth Mountain and Sea observed the scene with wide eyes, and many gasps rang out. In the Starry Sky Palace, the matriarch from the Five Colors sect watched with an expression of unprecedented anxiety. The young woman participating in the arena matches was not a chosen of the sect, but one of her direct bloodline descendants. "Save me," the girl cried in shrill alarm. She was now flying through the air toward the edge of the leaf and was just about to be sucked outside. She could see the terrifying rock inside the black wind nearby, opening its decomposing mouth. She could also see the eyeball with the countless veins stretching out from it. Meng Hao's eyes glittered, and he suddenly extended his hand toward the girl and made a grabbing motion. The star-plucking magic was unleashed as he grabbed onto her and pulled her back. However, the suction force was too strong, and all Meng Hao could do was slow her down a bit. "Hurry up and concede," he growled. The young woman suddenly seemed to come to her senses and urgently cried out, "I concede." As soon as the two words left her mouth, and just as she was about to be sucked outside, glittering light surrounded her and she vanished. When she reappeared, she was back down on the first layer of leaves, badly shaken and her face ashen. She looked up toward Meng Hao with an expression of deep gratitude. Meng Hao heaved a sigh of relief, then sat down cross-legged, looking out coldly at the half-headed man outside of the Dao tree. Everyone else who had been watching also sighed in relief. Ling Yunzi looked over at Meng Hao with even more admiration than before. Even he hadn't thought of using the words, "I concede," to get out of danger. Everyone out in the ninth mountain and sea was surprised by everything that had happened. They were especially shocked by how quickly Meng Hao had reacted. To them, it was evidence of incredible quick thinking and resourcefulness. That's right, all she had to do was concede, and then she was teleported out. It took a moment, but that was definitely the simplest method. How come I didn't think of that? This Fang Mu is extremely quick-witted to come up with a plan like that in such a situation. Up in the palace in the sky, the matriarch from the Five Colors sect took a deep breath and then glanced at Meng Hao on the vortex screen. Her expression was one of gratitude. She was not the type of person who liked to owe favors to others, so this was a kindness she would be sure to repay in the future. "The arena matches will now continue," said Ling Yunzi from his position beneath the Dao tree. "All of you must remember to never step foot outside of the arena. If any situation arises similar to what has just occurred, it would be much better to concede than to die." Ling Yunzi sighed. Although he was aware of why the three great Taoist societies had chosen this place to hold the arena matches, the dangers of the area made it such that those in the spirit realm really should not be here. Chapter 871, Invincible Power. The arena matches continued as the top 32 continued to fight. The dangers of the outside world had now become a sort of a tempering and assessment of their own. Because the young woman from the Five Colors sect conceded, Meng Hao was the first to complete this round, and he sat there cross-legged in the arena, looking at the half-headed man outside. The man looked back at him. Although there was a vast gap of empty space between them, as they looked at each other, Meng Hao could sense the feeling of a summons rising up within him. "If I get the chance, I will take back that sword." Meng Hao's eyes flickered. Although the sword might not seem special to anyone else, to Meng Hao, it had the 6th demon sealing hex. Each of the 8 demon sealing hexes were strange and mysterious. Both the body hexing and karmic hexing gave him superiority and flexibility when it came to fighting, and basically prevented anyone from guarding against his attacks. After 4 hours passed, the various arena matches wound to a conclusion. The top 16 were now set. From over 1,000 cultivators, successive victories had led these people into the top 16. Each and every one could be considered a peak expert of the spirit realm. Experts like this could crush false immortals, and could even compare to some extent to true immortals. In fact, most of them would assuredly employ an immortality illumination vine in the near future, after which it wouldn't be long before they became true immortals. Their path to immortality would be a smooth one, and given their accumulated resources, it would only be a few short years before they were at the peak of the immortal realm. This sequence of events happened once every 10,000 years. Since every true immortal could cultivate at a speed that far exceeded a false immortal, true immortals always rose to prominence and became famous in all the mountains and seas. Were it not for the incredible prizes being offered up during the arena matches, the various sects would not have sent their chosen here, but would have kept them in secluded meditation to prepare for true immortality. Actually, one of the reasons even more chosen hadn't joined the arena matches was that most of them were still in secluded meditation. Once they emerged, as long as they didn't fail in the process, they would be true immortals. Meng Hao took a deep breath, rose to his feet, and looked around at the top 16 competitors in the arena matches. Zhao Yifan was among them, as was Fan Donger. Sun Hai, surprisingly, was there too, as well as some of the other chosen who Meng Hao had previously taken note of. As far as competitors from the trial by fire, Li Yan had been defeated, as had the young man with the mosquitoes and junior blood immortal. Other than Meng Hao, the only remaining competitor from the trial by fire was the garrulous old man. Top 16. Rest and recuperate for 1 day, and then the battle for the top 8 will begin. The next day, the battle for the top 8 began. On the main trunk of the Dao tree, at the very top, there was a single golden leaf. Beneath that were 2 silver leaves, further down were 4 bronze leaves, and beneath that were 8 light green leaves. The battles for the top 8 would be fought on those 8 light green leaves. 8 battles fought simultaneously. All of the crowds in the 9th mountain and sea were paying rapt attention. The top 8 will be selected from these 16 people. Each one is a top expert of the Dao seeking stage. This round is definitely going to be spectacular. I wonder who exactly is going to win, who's going to be eliminated. Even the top 16 experts have no way of knowing. The thing I'm most curious about is whether that Fang Mu will be able to enter the top 8. In the Starry Sky Palace, the patriarchs were also paying close attention. By this point, Many people had already forgotten about the main reason why the arena matches of the trial by fire were being held to begin with. Whoever took first place would have a chance to be taken in by the three great Taoist sects as a disciple. The three patriarchs from the three great Taoist societies did nothing to remind anyone of this. It was almost as if the taking of disciples wasn't very important at all. Light glittered in front of Meng Hao, and next, he was standing on a light green leaf. In front of him, a thin, emaciated figure appeared. Although he was skinny, amorphous flames spread out around him as he walked forward. They were invisible, but Meng Hao could feel them, as if what was walking toward him was not a cultivator, but a flame devil. Within his eyes, flames appeared flickering. He wore a long black robe and his hair floated around him. He stood there, his energy surging, growing more and more powerful. Instantly, the air around him rippled and distorted. This was the chosen from the bones of the flame devil, one of the 5 holy lands, Chen Hao. Back in the 10 stages of the trial by fire, the masked Li Yan had repeatedly performed just behind Meng Hao. He had been defeated by Chen Hao, although he had ended up seriously wounding Chen Hao in the process. Meng Hao looked at him calmly, and Chen Hao looked back at him. Neither of them spoke. The flames in Chen Hao's eyes burned bright, and the air around him distorted as the invisible flames burned. The flames seemed capable of scorching anything and everything as they shot toward Meng Hao. No observer could see the fire, but by using divine sense, Meng Hao was able to sense them clearly. What he saw was an illusory body of flames rushing toward him. This is not the fire of the 5 elements, Meng Hao thought, his eyes glittering. The fire of the 5 elements was a natural law of heaven and earth. In fact, the fire wielded by the young woman from the 5 colors sect had contained that natural law. However, the flames unleashed by Chen Hao from the bones of the flame devil had no natural law, but instead, a strange will. After examining it closely for a moment, he realized that it seemed to be bound by some sort of summoning contract, as if some all-powerful being had bestowed the power of the flames. It was as if this flame was a type of life force flame. Meng Hao's expression was normal as he clenched his right hand into a fist. As soon as he punched out, a vortex appeared, which sent ripples spreading out. Explosive rumbling rang out as it slammed into the flames, and was then completely submerged by them. Said Meng Hao, falling back for the first time. Chen Hao's eyes overflowed with the desire to fight, and as Meng Hao retreated, he advanced, performing an incantation gesture that caused more roaring flames to appear around him. Shockingly, they transformed into the shape of an enormous mouth that bit toward Meng Hao. The sight of Meng Hao retreating caused quite a stir in the outside world. This was the first time they had ever seen him back up in a fight. However, as the flame mouth closed in on him, Meng Hao stopped in place and set his jaw. A look of anticipation gleamed in his eyes as he performed an incantation gesture. Then, he punched out repeatedly, using the 9 heavens' destruction once again. Booms rattled out in all directions as Meng Hao then transformed into a vulture that shot toward Chen Hao like black lightning. Chen Hao's face fell, and he performed an incantation gesture. Immediately, a set of flaming armor appeared around him. He reached out with his right hand in a grasping motion, causing an enormous flame spear to materialize. His hands closed around it, and he stabbed it toward the incoming Meng Hao. The scream of the spear was ear-splitting, and countless erupting volcanoes appeared around it as it shot toward Meng Hao in shocking fashion. Meng Hao snorted coldly as mountains of his own appeared and linked together into an equally shocking mountain range, although it appeared as a huge river to onlookers. It slammed into the volcanoes, causing a huge boom to rise into the air. Meng Hao's shocking Dharma idol appeared behind him. In that instant, Chen Hao tilted his back and roared. His own incredible Dharma idol appeared, a corpse which was covered in scales and emanated black flames. It contended with Meng Hao's Dharma idol. When the Dharma idols collided, Meng Hao employed the star-plucking magic. An incredible force that Chen Hao could not resist suddenly grabbed him, causing a sense of crisis to well up inside of him. Letting out a bellow of rage, Chen Hao caused his suit of flame armor to detonate, using the force of the mighty explosion to fight against Meng Hao's star-plucking magic. Chen Hao's face was ashen, and blood oozed out of the corners of his mouth. As of this point, he knew that he wasn't a match for Meng Hao, and yet he chose to continue fighting anyway. However, in the instant that his flame armor exploded, Meng Hao's eyes shone with an intense desire to do battle. He strode forward. Even the roaring flames could do nothing to prevent his charge. As he passed through the sea of flames, he let out a huge roar. The roar caused the entire leaf to tremble, and even passed outside of the Dao tree itself. At the same time, his roar caused an enormous wind to spring up, slashing into the sea of flames and cutting a path through them directly to Chen Hao. Chen Hao's face fell as he realized how powerful this Fang Mu was. It was only at this decisive moment of the battle that he realized that his opponent was completely terrifying. Magical techniques and divine abilities were secondary. The critical factor was his incredible energy. He has an aura of invincibility about him, thought Chen Hao, madness glowing in his eyes. He bit his tongue and spit out some blood, which then transformed into lava, and then exploded into meteors that streaked through the air toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao snorted coldly, then pointed out with his right finger as he unleashed the 8th demon sealing hex onto the sea of flames and the shooting stars. No outsider would be able to tell what was happening, but Chen Hao's face instantly fell as his cultivation base lurched to a standstill. The cost of that standstill was Meng Hao closed in, causing all of the shooting stars and the entire sea of flames to be sent spinning away. As Meng Hao bore down on Chen Hao, he punched out. A boom rang out as blood sprayed from Chen Hao's mouth. It only took a moment for him to recover, after which a fierce flame appeared in his eyes. Taking advantage of his backward motion, he spun his right leg around rapidly toward Meng Hao's head. At the same time, a look of determination appeared in his eyes. "Flame Devil transformation," he cried out. This battle was the complete focus of all eyes out in the 9th mountain and sea. As of now, they were beginning to see how invincible Meng Hao's power was. As for Chen Hao, he also possessed similar power. As they battled, neither of them spent any time on defense, but instead consistently attacked. Meng Hao did nothing to evade Chen Hao's spinning back kick. He lifted his left hand and grabbed down hard onto Chen Hao's leg, sending a massive power of vibration into it. Rumbling rang out, and Chen Hao coughed up some blood. However, by this time, his entire body was turning red. This red was not the red of blood, but rather the red of flames. It was as if all the blood in his body had turned into lava. Flames burst out all around him, engulfing him entirely. His skin didn't seem capable of bearing the flames and split apart all over. Soon, the rips and tears covered him completely. However, his energy exploded up, and despite the fact that Meng Hao was holding onto his leg tightly, he let out a bellow and caused flames to surge toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's expression was calm as he released his hand, then kicked out viciously with his foot. A boom rang out as Chen Hao was sent flying several dozen meters back. "Body transformation magic, huh?" said Meng Hao coolly. "Well, I'll just have to beat you back into your original state." He suddenly transformed into the vulture, which shot forward at incredible speed. Instantly, it appeared in front of Chen Hao and slashed at him with its claws. Then Meng Hao returned to human form and punched out with a fist. BOOMMM. After changing forms, Chen Hao thought that he would be even more powerful, capable of fighting Meng Hao. However, he never imagined that a few punches from Meng Hao would slam into him like wild tempests. The speed and power were incredible, and he was incapable of standing up to it. Just when he was about to try to resist, Meng Hao's divine sense transformed into an incredible crushing power that slammed down onto him. Chapter 872, She Appears. Meng Hao advanced as if he were crushing rotten twigs. Chen Hao fell back continuously. Instantly, dozens of lightning-like exchanges occurred between the two of them. Chen Hao constantly coughed up blood, and his energy was rapidly depleting. In the end, he slammed down onto the surface of the arena. The flames covering his body were extinguished, and blood spurted out all over. After struggling to his feet, he found a long spear leveled against his throat. It was none other than the spear Meng Hao had acquired in the warrior pavilion, with the shaft made from part of the world tree and a sharp bone spearhead. Thanks to the power of the black feather, however, it looked completely different, and was something no one would ever recognize. Chen Hao shivered as he sensed the murderous aura coming from the spearhead, which left his entire body feeling ice cold. Then there was Meng Hao, whose eyes had remained intensely cold from the beginning of their battle until this moment. He seemed to be waiting for Chen Hao to say something, and if Chen Hao didn't say it, then the spear would stab completely through his throat. Meng Hao didn't say anything, he just looked calmly at Chen Hao. Out in the world of the 9th mountain and sea, cultivators watched the match with thumping hearts. They had never heard of Fang Mu before, but now, he astonished them in battle after battle, proving that he was more powerful than any opponent could imagine. He can definitely take first place. Heavens, he took first place in the trial by fire already. If he also takes first place in the arena matches, then he. This is matchlessly breathtaking. Throughout all the years, there has never been another person like this. Just who is he? There's no way a person like him could be an obscure nobody. While the audiences were in an uproar, the 10th Wang clan patriarch floated in the starry sky. His eyes glittered brightly, and immortal chi swirled around him for a long moment before he retracted it. The desire to fight burned strongly in his eyes. Meng Hao. Near planet East Victory, Patriarch Reliance switched back and forth between smiling broadly and gnashing his teeth. He definitely had very complex feelings regarding Meng Hao. Everyone was watching as Chen Hao lay silently in the arena. He took a deep, painful breath and looked up at Meng Hao. "How much of your cultivation base did you use?" he asked suddenly. "Is that really important?" Meng Hao replied coolly. "It is to me," said Chen Hao firmly. "Well, not to me." Meng Hao shook his head, staring at Chen Hao coldly and with a bit of impatience. Chen Hao's trembling heart filled with coldness. Then he suddenly recalled standing in the outside world, watching some of Fang Mu's bizarre actions. Immediately, he pulled a bag of holding out from within his robe. "There are over 3 million spirit stones here. I didn't bring many with me today, but you can have them if you just answer my question." Moments before, Meng Hao's expression had been ice cold, as emotionless as a cold-blooded killer. Now, however, his eyes narrowed, and a slight smile crossed his face. It happened so quickly that Chen Hao stared in shock. Meng Hao quickly grabbed the bag of holding and scanned it with his spiritual sense. Finally, his face beamed with joy. "Elder Brother Chen, there's really no need for this," he said, licking his lips. "It's just a question, right? What's the point in pulling out so many spirit stones? All right, all right. If I refuse them, that would be an insult to you. In that case, I guess I'll just have to suck it up and take them." His current expression was indeed vastly different than what it had been before. Chen Hao stared in disbelief at how different Meng Hao was now and how quickly he had changed. It seemed unbelievable how completely natural the change had come to him. "Taking money to resolve others' issues, Elder Brother Chen, just now I was using 70% full power." These last 4 words were transmitted directly into Chen Hao's mind. Of course, as to how much he used, naturally, that was something he would never reveal. Chen Hao rose to his feet taciturn. He didn't want to believe Meng Hao, but the answer mostly lined up with his own judgment and perception. Giving Meng Hao a long, penetrating look, he finally uttered the words, "I concede." Immediately, he faded away and reappeared on the first level of leaves. Meng Hao was feeling very pleased. He had never imagined that he would be able to earn some spirit stones in the middle of fighting. Suddenly, he looked up in thought, and then an annoyed expression appeared on his face. "How could I have forgotten about making money? If I'd thought of doing this earlier, I probably could have made a small fortune in the past few matches." As the battles to decide the top 8 continued, Meng Hao sat down cross-legged. After glancing around at the other battles going on around him, he looked down toward the Nascent Soul Arena matches and Chen Fan. The Nascent Soul Arena matches were also in the middle of determining their top 8. Chen Fan was soaked in blood as he fought a young woman. A look of annoyance crossed her face as they fought back and forth. Up to this point in the battle, the gloomy will cast out by Chen Fan's attacks had kept the woman feeling quite suppressed. However, this young woman was not one of the trial by fire competitors. She was a nascent soul chosen from the Solitary Sword Pavilion, and was definitely powerful enough to make it into the top 4. She and Chen Fan were currently fighting back and forth. Meng Hao watched the battle silently. Based on the level of his cultivation base, he was able to tell that Chen Fan had reached the end of the line in this battle. Moments later, Chen Fan lost, and was unable to enter the top 8. He clasped hands silently to the young woman as his body faded away, and he reappeared down below. Meng Hao sighed. He had sensed the deep bitterness within Chen Fan on previous occasions, but it wasn't until Su Qing finally departed that he came to understand why Chen Fan had fallen so low. Time passed and rumbling booms echoed out. Gradually, victory and defeat were determined in multiple arenas. However, it was at this time that, all of a sudden, numerous figures appeared outside of the Dao Tree. They hovered there, faces blank as they stared at the arena matches on the Dao Tree. Each and every one of these figures emanated auras that would cause anyone to tremble. Ling Yunzi and the other 2 old men started to get nervous. By the time the battles to select the top 8 had concluded, there were numerous terrifying figures outside of the Dao Tree. One of them had the upper body of a cultivator and the tail of a snake. The creature materialized in midair, then looked coldly over at the Dao Tree, her eyes flickering with a bloodthirsty gleam. There was another shocking thing that attracted all eyes. It was not a living creature, but rather an enormous battle axe. The head of the axe was carved with mountains and rivers and appeared to be flecked with rust. The battle axe made no sound as it materialized, but after it appeared, most of the other entities near it moved away. This battle axe sent the crowds out in the ninth mountain and sea into an uproar. However, there were few people who knew what the battle axe represented, other than the patriarchs in the Starry Sky Palace. The three patriarchs from the three great Taoist societies all rose to their feet. Their expressions were deeply solemn, and within their eyes appeared gleams of hope and excitement. The patriarchs from the other clans also had serious expressions as they stood up. One of the main reasons they had agreed to hold the arena matches in the ruins of immortality was because of the plan that had been laid out before them earlier by the three great Taoist societies. If that plan succeeded, then all of the sects would benefit. "So, will she appear?" asked the old man from the Kunlun Society. When he spoke the word she, his voice quavered a bit. "Perhaps, perhaps not," said the patriarch from the Sublime Flow Sword Grotto. "Either way, we have a chance." Back in the location of the Tao-seeking arena matches, the top 8 had been selected. They stood on their 8 respective green leaves, the center of all attention. Those 8 cultivators included Meng Hao, the garrulous old man, Zhao Yifan, Fan Donger, and Li Linger. In addition to those 5, there was the young man from the Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum, who fought using corpses and coffins. The 7th person was the tall, muscular man from the Kunlun Society who attacked with descending mountains. He was the one who had defeated Sun Hai. The last person was the youth from the Burning Incense Stick Society. He had a third eye on his forehead, and throughout all the matches, had only ever attacked anyone once. All the other times, he merely transmitted some words, whereupon his opponents would prostrate themselves on the ground and look at him with fanatical piety. Of these 8 people, 6 were chosen, and 2 were competitors from the trial by fire. They were now the focus of all attention from the outside world. Countless eyes looked on with anticipation, waiting to find out which of the 8 would make it into the semifinals, and after that, the final battle. "The semi-final qualification matches will be different than the previous matches," said Ling Yunzi, his voice echoing out in all directions. "Victory will no longer be determined by a single battle. Each and every one of you must fight at least 4 battles. First, we will determine who are the top 4 and the bottom 4. The winners of the first fight will become the top 4, the losers will be the bottom 4. Then, each of the top 4 will fight the remaining 3 competitors who they did not fight previously. In the end, the 4 people who end up with the most victories will become the final 4. The outcome of any tie will be determined by a tie-breaking match. You will have 3 days to rest and recuperate. After that, the semi-final qualification matches will begin. This method of determining the final 4 would prevent anyone from winning out through sheer luck. Furthermore, the final 4 would well and truly deserve to be called the most powerful. The 3 great Taoist societies had decided on this method, and none of the other sects had disagreed. Time passed. Meng Hao sat there cross-legged, feeling quite confident. However, the other 7 people in the competition were all powerful experts, especially Zhao Yifan and the others. Meng Hao had already tangled with them on planet South Heaven and was very curious as to how the coming matches would turn out. Even more curious were the audiences out in the ninth mountain and sea. Many bets had already been placed on the final outcomes. Zhao Yifan will definitely make it to the semifinals. Fan Donger will most likely make it as well. I wonder if Fang Mu will be able to continue his legendary run. 3 days later, just when Ling Yunzi's echoing voice was announcing the beginning of the semifinals qualification matches, and all eyes in the ninth mountain and sea were focused on the vortex screens in anticipation. Music suddenly drifted toward the Dao tree from off in the distance. The music drifted slowly about, echoing in the ears, penetrating the mind. Everyone who heard it suddenly felt sorrow in their hearts, which influenced their emotions. It was a sad song, filled with longing, as if it were recalling the past and an old friend. As the music echoed about, a woman approached from off in the distance. She wore a snow-white gown and was stunningly beautiful. She approached slowly and came to a stop above the Dao tree. Her face was ice-cold, seemingly devoid of any emotion whatsoever. Her sudden appearance on the scene caused everyone to stare in shock. She was as different from the other beings in the ruins of immortality as black is from white. Immediately, the black wind shuddered, and the huge rock let out a miserable shriek. They both fled in terror at top speed. Apparently, that rock had been killed by the woman in the past. As for the blood-colored eye, it shrank back, trembling, and then fled. The other almighty figures all dropped to their knees and then kowtowed to the woman. As for the Naga cultivator, she let out a shriek of astonishment and then fled, terrified. Chapter 873, She's a Paragon. The battle axe emitted a droning sound as it approached the white-robed woman and circulated around her. She looked at it, and slowly, an expression of reminiscence and sorrow appeared on her face. Everyone on the ancient Dao tree felt their hearts thumping as they stared blankly at the woman. Ling Yunzi and the other two old men were also trembling, and their faces were pale white. They said absolutely nothing. Meng Hao's eyes widened as well. However, what was most concerning to him was not the woman and her appearance on the scene, but the fact that the half-headed man who had been following him and was now hovering near the arenas did not flee or bow like the other beings. He quivered a bit, but by force of will remained hovering there just as before. When Meng Hao saw this, his heart pounded. The patriarchs from the three great Taoist societies urgently stepped forward toward the vortex. Their expressions were that of shock, and they seemed to be thinking a variety of thoughts. Moments later, though, they trembled with wild joy. All of the other patriarchs were staring at the woman, dumbstruck. It's actually her. She looks exactly like the image recorded in the sex records. When the three great Taoist societies told us about their plan, I thought it was crazy. That woman. How could she be alive after all this time? The patriarchs from all the sects were now on their feet, staring at the white-robed woman in the vortex screen in disbelief. She's the paragon from the legends, murmured the old man from the Kunlun Society. Similar words echoed about in the minds of all of the other patriarchs in the starry sky palace, and waves of audible gasps arose from the crowd there. Meanwhile, at the very peak of the ninth mountain was a statue of a cross-legged man sitting atop a boulder. The statue seemed devoid of any life force whatsoever, and yet, in this instant, cracks spread out across the surface of the statue. At the same time, the stars in the sky above the ninth mountain went dim, with the exception of one, which shone brilliantly, almost as if it were a solitary eye. It seemed expressionless and ancient, as if it could lord it over all the entire starry sky and everything in it. It looked at the nearby vortex screen and saw the woman floating there, and the eye trembled. Paragon, murmured an ancient voice. Back by the arenas, the white-robed woman hovered there in midair, looking at the Tao tree. All of the cultivators on the tree got the feeling that she was examining them personally. Ling Yunzi was panting, as were the two old men next to him. After a long moment passed, he clenched his teeth violently and then, face ashen, said, "Cultivators of the nascent soul, spirit severing and Tao seeking stages in the arena matches, let the qualifying round for the semifinals begin. Unleash your most powerful divine abilities. Let loose your most powerful Taos. All of you are fighting in arena matches. However, this is also a chance for perhaps the greatest good fortune of your entire lives. Whether or not you can seize this opportunity is up to your own destiny." Ling Yunzi wasn't able to reveal any further information. What he had already said pushed the limits of the boundaries. His words caused the hearts of all the cultivators in the arenas to tremble. Meng Hao was especially interested in the white-robed woman. He got a very strange sensation when he looked at her. He could see her with his physical eyes, but when he tried to look at her with divine sense, it was as if she wasn't even there. Glittering lights surrounded all of the cultivators, and they appeared on the green layer of leaves. Instantly, everyone was facing an opponent. Meng Hao's opponent was none other than Li Linger. Zhao Yifan was facing the hulking man from the Kunlun Society. As for the other matches, the garrulous old man was up against the smiling youth from the Burning Incense Stick Society. The last match was between Fan Donger and the young man from the Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum. The match to decide the top four and the bottom four was now beginning. As Li Linger and Meng Hao faced off against each other, the willow leaf mark on Li Linger's forehead suddenly shone brightly, and an incredible aura exploded out from her. A strange expression appeared on Meng Hao's face, and he cleared his throat. Without even thinking about it, he glanced toward her rear end. "How shameless," she said with a cold frown. She raised her right hand, instantly causing an ancient, archaic tree to appear behind her. Shockingly, as soon as it materialized, it seemed to form a resonance with the ancient Tao tree, and brilliant light rose up to surround Li Linger, causing her energy to surge. She waved her hand, causing the ancient tree's branches to whip through the air, weaving together almost like vines as they snaked toward Meng Hao at incredible speed. This was not the first time Meng Hao had gone up against Li Linger. Back in the southern domain, he had defeated her and taken her captive. However, his victory had come as the result of a bit of trickery. He had used the teleportation power of the lightning cauldron to quickly defeat her. It was not possible to use the lightning cauldron in the arena matches, lest he reveal his identity. However, Meng Hao was also different than he had been during their initial encounter. Now he had an immortal meridian that was 80% solidified, and his true immortal powers made him vastly more powerful than before. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as he observed the incoming vines. Then he kicked out, his energy surging with the power of true immortality. Behind him, his Dharma idol appeared, disguised with the transformative powers of the black feather. The gigantic Dharma idol brandished its fists and then punched out, causing boundless light to appear that transformed into a Dharma sea, which then shot toward the incoming vines. A huge boom rang out and massive ripples spread out. Meng Hao didn't back up even an inch but instead headed directly toward Li Linger. Last time, he had relied on his aura of invincibility to capture her. Now, his true fighting style could be unleashed. As he closed in, he transformed into a vulture, which slashed its claws toward Li Linger with lightning speed. Li Linger's face flickered, and she performed a double-handed incantation gesture. A magical bottle appeared, which she then tossed out ahead of her. "Shatter," said Meng Hao. His vulture form slashed viciously at the bottle, and at the same time he secretly unleashed the claw magic that he had learned from the wall of the immortal ancient Taoist Rite Temple. 1. This claw magic is a reference to something he learned in chapter 809. A boom rang out as the bottle exploded. In their last encounter, Meng Hao had been forced to use the blood demon grand magic to deal with the magical bottle, but this time, all it took was a single strike on his part. 2. Meng Hao fought with Li Linger in chapter 821. It was just a simple magical technique, but Meng Hao could clearly sense how much more powerful it was now. Li Linger's face fell and she panted. She anxiously fell into retreat, and yet, no matter how fast she moved, Meng Hao always kept up, bearing down on her as the vicious vulture. He slashed at her again, causing the air to vibrate, as a will of invincibility exploded out. BONMM. Li Linger was defeated in exchange after exchange. No matter how she attacked, no matter what divine abilities or magical techniques she employed, regardless of the various magical items she used, they were all useless. Meng Hao bashed her over and over again like a buffeting windstorm, as easily as he would step on a dried weed. After only the space of a few breaths, the two had exchanged dozens of blows. Blood sprayed from Li Linger's mouth, and a look of shock crossed her face. This match caused her to recall Meng Hao from planet South Heaven. He was equally swift and fierce, equally invincible, equally impossible to rattle. Were it not for the fact that she got the feeling that this Fang Mu far exceeded Meng Hao, she would definitely have assumed that they were one and the same person. They can't be the same, she thought. Meng Hao might have possessed a will of invincibility, but his energy was not incredible like this. Fang Mu has intense energy, far more than that damned Meng Hao. She fell back again, gritted her teeth, and performed another incantation gesture, causing her enormous tree to suddenly begin to vibrate. World Tree, detonate. Rebuke the heavens with your spirit. Transform for me, stifle all the earth. Li Linger's voice echoed with an ancient cadence, and caused the air between her and Meng Hao to echo with deep rumbling. Thump. The sound caused everything to shake. The surface of the arena trembled, and Meng Hao's face flickered. Li Linger had used this exact same divine ability the last time they had fought, and it was as astonishing as it had been before. The pressure exerted by the image of the World Tree was intense. Last time, if he hadn't possessed the Sunstone, he would never have been able to win the battle. After all, Li Linger possessed 50% of the might of a true immortal. Thump. 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 The successive rumbling sounds seemed to strike at Meng Hao's heart. The air around him distorted, and wild colors flashed. Everything was shaking as the tree behind Li Linger suddenly collapsed. Its leaves fell, and its branches withered until all that was left of the tree was a single log. It was the World Tree. As it fell towards the ground, it emitted a droning sound and passed through Li Linger to shoot toward Meng Hao. She performed a double-handed incantation, causing her hair to whip around her head, and more power to pour into the attack. At the same time, a pearl appeared above her head. It rotated rapidly, which would apparently sustain her cultivation base, preventing it from being drained by the tree. "That's nothing but an illusory World Tree," said Meng Hao, his eyes glittering. His cultivation base far exceeded its previous level. He extended his right hand, and the world tree spear appeared with its bone spearhead. Meng Hao hefted it and then flung it toward the incoming illusory world tree. From the perspective of the spectators in the ninth mountain and sea, a green sun suddenly appeared between Meng Hao and Li Linger as the world tree, and the long spear slammed into each other. Instantly, a monstrous roaring sound filled the air as the illusory world tree trembled, and, incapable of standing up to the long spear, collapsed into pieces and then violently exploded. The spear sliced through the illusory tree like a sharp knife through a piece of bamboo, emerging from the shattered remnants to bear down on Li Linger with incredible speed. In that critical moment, the pearl floating above Li Linger's head shattered, causing a gentle force to flow out and then shove her off to the side. The long spear whistled through the air, kicking up a powerful wind that instantly sent Li Linger's hair into complete and utter disarray. Meng Hao appeared off to Li Linger's side, grasping the long spear and glancing down at her curvaceous rear end. At the same time, Li Linger, who had just avoided the attack, looked over with eyes that flickered with killing intent. In the same moment that she passed Meng Hao, she raised her right hand, gathered the power of the exploded pearl treasure, and then stabbed her two fingers toward Meng Hao's eyes. In that instant, Meng Hao let out a cold snort and extended his left hand to violently spank Li Linger's buttocks. It was a cruel strike, similar to the strike which had landed on her not too long ago. The slapping sound was accompanied by a miserable shriek from Li Linger. Once again, her rear end was now uneven. She even felt her pelvis creaking. She staggered backward in retreat, her face pale and devoid of any blood. Chapter 874, Semifinals. "I'm gonna kill you," raged Li Linger. Subconsciously, she had already superimposed Meng Hao's image over Fang Mu. She didn't realize that this had happened, as the sudden intense pain in that specific region left her with no time for deep consideration. Just when she had been about to attack, agonizing pain sent her staggering backward. At the same time, the long spear whistled through the air and came to a stop right in front of her forehead. Meng Hao looked down at her coldly. After the previous incident, his mother had told him that Li Linger was the same Princess Linger whose hair he had lit on fire as a child. He also knew that his grandpa Fang had arranged for the two of them to be married. However, Meng Hao did not approve of such an agreement. He only had one wife, and that was Su Qing. Li Linger trembled as she felt the coldness radiating off of the spear that was pointed at her forehead. A sensation of imminent death washed over her, and she knew that if she didn't say the two words that Meng Hao was expecting to hear, the spearhead would unhesitatingly stab directly into her forehead. "I don't want to kill you," Meng Hao said coolly. Actually, there was something else that he wanted to say. He still had Li Linger's promissory note in his bag of holding, so until he got his spirit stones, he needed her alive. If she died, who would repay the spirit stones? Li Linger glared at Meng Hao, her ample chest rising and falling as she breathed heavily. Finally, she gritted her teeth and slowly said the two words. "I concede." Immediately, she vanished, then reappeared on the next layer of leaves. She had not lost her chance to get into the semifinals. If she won out in the following 3 matches, she would still have that opportunity. After all, this first round was only to determine who was in the top 4 and the bottom 4. Immediately, the crowds in the ninth mountain and sea commented. "Fang Mu beat Li Linger. He'll definitely be in the top 4. Li Linger is a chosen of the Li clan, and will without doubt become a true immortal in the future. I even heard that she's never been beaten before, and that a fight between her and Fan Donger once ended in a draw. This Fang Mu is invincible." Meng Hao was not the first person to secure a win. Shockingly, the first battle to end was the one between Zhao Yifan and the hulking man from the Kunlun Society. That battle had been just as astonishing as Meng Hao's fight just now, and had drawn quite a bit of attention. When the man from the Kunlun Society attacked, he used an enormous chain of mountains. Even he himself seemed like a mountain, completely impervious to all attacks. However, Zhao Yifan was also a terrifying figure, which became clearly apparent in their battle. He only used 6 earth-shattering sword moves in the fight. Each sword attack was more shocking than the one before it, and they slashed down onto the mountains, severely injuring the big man from the Kunlun Society. The final sword blow was so powerful that the man from the Kunlun Society was powerless to resist it. His mountains exploded, and were it not for the fact that Zhao Yifan was holding back his killing intent, the man would definitely have been slain. The battle's result caused quite a commotion in the outside world. Unfortunately, The patriarchs in the starry sky palace were not watching the arena matches, but instead were focused on the white-robed woman. Their expressions were a mix of reverence and other complex emotions. Booming sounds continued to rattle out as the garrulous old man, one of the trial by fire competitors, fought against the young man from the burning incense stick society. Although their ages were different, both of them gave off the feeling that they were hustlers of some kind. One of them didn't attack, but rather constantly mumbled and chattered madly at his opponents, frothing at the mouth. The other smiled and transmitted words into his opponents' minds, causing them to fall down and worship him. In fact, even after those battles ended, the opponents would continue to look piously at the young man from down below on the lowest layer of leaves. When they fought, they didn't engage in close-quarter fighting. Instead, they sat down cross-legged and looked at each other. Although nothing usual seemed to be going on, those who were in the know understood that they were currently in an extremely ruthless showdown. A battle of divine will. Burning Incense Stick Society excels in the use of divine will. They coalesce the will of many living things to become their Tao of burning incense. Xianxia is a chosen of the Burning Incense Stick Society, and supposedly he's in the running to become Tao Child. His strength and divine will is spectacular. 1. Xianxia's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Zai Zion. Zai is a surname which also means thanks. Yi means one, and Xian means immortal. If I remember correctly, the old man's name is Qian Duojuo. He is going to participate in a divine will contest with Zai Yixian from the Burning Incense Stick Society. 2. Qian Duojuo's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Qian Duo. Qian is a surname which also means money. Both dual characters mean many or more. On the other battleground, Fan Donger was facing the young man from the Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum. Fierce fighting raged between the two of them, and the face of the young man from the Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum twisted with passion. His eyes seemed capable of melting any coldness, but what had driven him mad was not Fan Donger. Rather, part of the mist behind Fan Donger had been scattered during the course of the fighting to reveal the female corpse behind her. "That is the most beautiful corpse I have seen in my entire life," murmured the young man. 7 coffins were arrayed in front of him, all of them open to reveal 7 corpses, which he was using to fight Fan Donger. Fan Donger was on the verge of going mad. Right now, there was nothing she hated more in the world than corpses, and the look in her opponent's eyes filled her with revulsion. Booms rang out, and time slipped by. The white-robed woman continued to float above the Tao tree, coldly watching the cultivators in the arena matches. It was impossible to tell what she might be thinking. After a long moment passed, a boom rattled out next to Fan Donger, and the young man coughed up a mouthful of blood. He fell back, and as he did, a black hair suddenly appeared in his hand. It did not belong to Fan Donger, but rather the female corpse. Fan Donger's face twisted into an unsightly expression as the mist behind her vanished. The white-robed corpse was now clearly visible to everyone who was watching in the 9th mountain and sea. Caption ID equals Tatment / 72975. Align equals Align Center. Width equals 580. Official ISSTH art of Fan Donger / caption. "I concede," cried the young man from the Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum. He coughed up some more blood, but his face was plastered with a look of enchantment. He held the hair up to his nose and inhaled deeply, then carefully put the hair away. Eyes burning, he looked over at the female corpse behind Fan Donger. "She is my true love. Fan Donger, you better take good care of her." With that, the young man vanished to appear on the set of leaves for the bottom contenders among the top 8. However, he continued to look down at the corpse, intoxicated. Discussions rose up among the audiences in the 9th mountain and sea. "That guy Zio Luo from the Paleo-Immortal Museum is such a pervert. He's a chosen, but it turns out he's a necrophiliac." 3. Zio Luo's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Zio Luo. Zio is a surname which means resemble. Luo means a lot of things including net. "I can't believe what everyone has been saying is true. There's a female corpse floating behind Fan Donger. From what I heard, the corpse got attached to her when she ran into some fellow named Meng Hao on planet South Heaven." As the crowds buzzed about the matter, the match between the garrulous Qian Duojuo and Zai Yixian from the Burning Incense Stick Society had come to an end. Zai Yixian's face was flushed, and blood gushed out of his mouth. After wiping it off, he sighed lightly, rose to his feet, and bowed to the old man. "I have been thoroughly convinced that your divine will magic is an amazing inheritance, fellow Taoist," he said. "I Zai concede." Qian Duojuo's face was also a bit pale. His eyes snapped open and he rose to his feet, then solemnly clasped hands toward Xianxia. Conversations broke out. So Qian Duojiu won. He defeated Xianxia from the Burning Incense Stick Society. Just how strong is his divine will? He's really a dark horse in this competition. Earlier I had assumed he wouldn't make it past the top 16. I never imagined he would pull off a win like this and make it into the top 4. Regardless of the analyses of the outside crowds, the top 4 had been decided. Meng Hao, Zhao Yifan, Qian Duojiu, and Fan Donger. The bottom 4 consisted of Li Linger, Xianxia, Xiao Luo, and the hulking man from the Kunlun Society. What would happen next would be the final 3 battles of the round. Now everyone from the top 4 would have to fight against the rest of the bottom 4. After all of the battles were completed, the 4 people with the most wins would become the semi-finalists. After 6 hours of rest, when everyone was back at their peak readiness, the second fight in the struggle to qualify for the semi-finals began. Meng Hao stood motionless on the bronze leaf as light glittered in front of him to reveal the hulking man from the Kunlun Society. The man stepped forward and it was like the descent of numerous mountains, although Meng Hao's expression was unchanged. Regarding the various sects of the Ninth Mountain and Sea, he was already familiar with the demon immortal sect because of Xianxia. Also, he knew of the Kunlun Society. His master Pill Demon had joined the Kunlun Society, and because of that, Meng Hao smiled amiably at the hulking man. The big man stared in shock, then nodded at Meng Hao and clasped hands. "I'm Yang Yi from the Kunlun Society," he said. "Fellow Taoist Fang, please give me some fighting tips." "Of course," replied Meng Hao, clasping hands back at the man. Introductions having been made, Yang Yi's eyes glowed brightly, and a massive aura exploded out as he charged toward Meng Hao. As he neared, shockingly, numerous mountains materialized around him. Meng Hao's expression was unchanged, but his pupils constricted. He had noticed before that this hulking man was wielding the mountain-consuming incantation. The mountain-consuming incantation was a Taoist magic from the ancient demon immortal sect, and previously, Meng Hao had assumed it was something only he could wield. Having seen the hulking Yang Yi in action, though, he was now much more interested in the Kunlun Society. So, the mountain-consuming incantation, thought Meng Hao. Laughing inwardly, he also stepped forward, causing numerous mountains to materialize around him. Of course, with the help of the black feather, he made them look like streams of water. Instantly, the two fought back and forth. They did not use a variety of techniques, but rather focused on the mountain-consuming incantation and their incredibly powerful fleshly bodies. "Are you MMBLE?" Dozens of exchanges occurred, after which Yang Yi fell back, body trembling, but eyes overflowing with the desire to fight. "Wonderful, this match is far more enjoyable than the fight with Zhao Yifan." Yang Yi laughed heartily, then clenched his fists, causing the mountains around him to link up into a mountain range. He himself seemed to change into an enormous mountain. Meng Hao was laughing as loudly as Yang Yi. He attacked, causing the streams to unite into a mighty river that rumbled through the air. They fought back and forth again, holding nothing back. Booms echoed out, attracting quite a bit of attention from the shocked audience. They didn't fight for very long, only enough time for an incense stick to burn. Finally, Yang Yi was sent staggering backward 7 or 8 paces. Panting, he flicked his sleeve, causing the mountains to vanish. Then he stood there and gazed deeply at Meng Hao. Finally, he shook his head and laughed. "I'm not a match for you. I have to concede. However, I do have to say that this was the most fun I've had in all of the arena matches." "Yang Yi won't be entering the semifinals. However, if you have time, elder brother Fang, please come to the Kunlun Society so that we can drink together." Meng Hao laughed. He could sense that Yang Yi was an outspoken and straightforward person. After all of Meng Hao's years spent in the world of cultivation, he could tell that the man was no hypocrite or faker. Meng Hao nodded and smiled. "I will definitely be going to the Kunlun Society," he said. Yang Yi laughed as he faded away to reappear on another leaf for his third battle. Meng Hao took a deep breath and then sat down cross-legged. After an hour passed, light suddenly glittered as the third battle began. However, no opponent appeared. Instead, rumbling rang out as 9 coffins materialized, smashing down from up above. "The female corpse behind Fan Donger is my true love, so I can't harm her. The rest of you, however, are completely different." The voice which spoke was soft and feminine, but the figure who walked out of the light was a man. This was none other than Xiao Luo from the Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum, one of the 5 great holy lands. Chapter 875, Domineering. When Xiao Luo made his appearance, a cold wind sprang up, causing his hair and robes to flutter. He was clearly male, but there was also something overtly feminine about him. This was especially true when it came to his cheerless eyes, which caused his handsome features to be strangely twisted. Xiao Luo stood there in the middle of the arena, looking at Meng Hao. Meng Hao's expression was unchanged, as he stood there looking past the 9 upright coffins at Xiao Luo. "9 heavens Usra squad," cried Xiao Luo, his eyes flickering with killing intent. He waved his hand, causing rumbling sounds to emanate out of the 9 coffins, which then simultaneously opened, causing a thick aura of death to spill out. The air twisted, and strange colors danced. 9 tall figures appeared within the coffins, 9 corpses who abounded with auras of death. Their bodies were not decomposing, but rather mummified. They wore tattered clothing and had vicious expressions, and it was just possible to tell that 7 were men and 2 were women. "Kill him," said Xiao Luo with a vicious chuckle. A ruthless gleam showed in his eyes as the 9 corpses charged toward Meng Hao, kicking up a foul wind. They closed in on Meng Hao instantly. However, Meng Hao's expression didn't change in the slightest. He extended his right hand, within which materialized the World Tree spear with the bone spearhead. Then he dashed forward like the wind, the spearhead leading the way. A bang rang out, along with an ear-piercing rumble as a huge vortex appeared, spreading out in all directions and instantly interfering with the 9 corpses' movement. Meng Hao moved rapidly, bypassing the corpses and heading directly toward Xiao Luo. In the time it takes a spark to fly off of a piece of flint, Xiao Luo performed an incantation gesture with his right hand and pointed toward the surface of the arena. Immediately, yin-type qi surged up, transforming into a blast that shot toward Meng Hao like a huge wall. A boom rang out as Meng Hao's spear pierced the yin-qi wall. The wall shuddered and then collapsed, after which Xiao Luo waved his hand, causing 9 black magical needles to appear. They shot toward Meng Hao like 9 black vapors. At the same time, the 9 corpses that were now behind Meng Hao turned, becoming black beams of light that surrounded Meng Hao. Xiao Luo laughed coldly. He had unleashed his most powerful magic in an attempt to catch his opponent off guard. "Die!" In this moment of deadly crisis, Meng Hao simply snorted. He stabbed his spear into the surface of the leaf, causing a boom to echo out. Cracks spread out across the surface of the arena as a shocking energy suddenly exploded. It transformed into a storm-like vortex that spread out in all directions, slamming into the corpses. The corpses fell back, trembling, and as for the 9 needles, cracking sounds rang out as they simply fell to pieces mid-flight. Within the screaming vortex, Meng Hao released his grip on the spear, then transformed into the vulture. There was a flash, and then he appeared directly in front of Xiao Luo and slashed at him viciously. Boom! Xiao Luo's face fell, and he quickly performed an incantation gesture, causing the yin qi to surge, transforming into another wall to block against the vulture's slash. A huge boom rang out as that wall collapsed too. Before Xiao Luo could even fall back in retreat, the vulture vanished and Meng Hao reappeared, his leg flashing around in a spinning kick. Bang rang out as the kick, seemingly powerful enough to smash mountains, formed a semicircle and slammed directly into Xiao Luo. In that critical moment, Xiao Luo's eyes went wide, and he spit a pearl out of his mouth. The pearl emanated a powerful glow that attempted to block the kick, and yet instantly shattered, incapable of standing up to the attack. However, it did manage to give Xiao Luo a moment of breathing room. Coughing up blood, he rapidly fell backward in retreat. At the same time, Meng Hao increased his speed and levied another attack. Currently, he paid no heed to defending but rather attacked like lightning, like a windstorm that could crush anything in its path. He bore down on Xiao Luo like a tempest, performing an incantation with his right hand, and then stabbing his finger out ahead of him. The shocking finger attack caused the air to vibrate, and Xiao Luo's face to fall. This magical battle was unfolding so quickly that Xiao Luo had no time to even breathe. He had to exercise complete and utter attention. The slightest misstep would leave him dead. Xiao Luo performed an incantation gesture as fast as possible, causing the yin qi to form into numerous pearls. "Burst, burst, burst," roared Xiao Luo. Booms rang out as the pearls flew toward Meng Hao and then exploded, transforming into a powerful shockwave that swept out in all directions. A vicious smile appeared on Xiao Luo's face. The yin qi pearls seemed ordinary, but in fact they were a secret magic from the Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum. Any one of those explosions was powerful enough to slay a peak Dao-seeking expert. Xiao Luo knew his opponent was powerful, but even a stone golem would at least be injured by their detonation. I just need to put a bit of distance between us, Xiao Luo thought with a cold laugh. Then I can send the 9 corpses to slaughter him. Just as Xiao Luo was about to continue to fall back, the air twisted as Meng Hao stepped into the explosions. To him, these detonating pearls could do nothing more than inflict flesh wounds. His right hand clenched into a fist and he sent out a punch. Boom! Xiao Luo let out a miserable shriek. Blood sprayed from his mouth as he tumbled backward. Instantly, Meng Hao was on him again, slamming out with an attack that could shatter rock. Xiao Luo once again fell back, blood pouring from his mouth. Instantly, 10 more exchanges were made. Meng Hao's shocking energy and will of invincibility made it so that all Xiao Luo could do was fall back and focus all of his energy on defending himself. He wasn't the slightest bit capable of attacking. Meng Hao's moves were just too swift and too vicious. Booms echoed out in the short span of a few breaths that to Xiao Luo seemed like a very, very long time. Then, a cracking sound rang out as his leg was broken by Meng Hao. Intense pain caused his face to go pale. A look of complete astonishment crossed his face. Damn it, he thought, I can't let him build up any more energy, otherwise I'm going to be defeated for sure. The crowds outside watched the semi-final qualification rounds with intense concentration. Many were focusing on Meng Hao and were completely astonished by what they saw. If I were in Xiao Luo's place, I would be just as powerless. This Fang Mu is completely domineering. His attacks are swift and fierce. He's totally incomparable. You definitely can't let yourself be put on the defensive when facing Fang Mu. Doing that is just giving him a chance to explode with ferocity and turn the battle into a catastrophe. Xiao Luo gritted his teeth, and a look of madness appeared on his face. Roaring, he caused bursts of yin qi to explode out, which formed into numerous ghostly figures. Just as he was going to attempt to make a counterattack, Meng Hao's fist landed again. All of Xiao Luo's qi collapsed, and he was sent flying backward like a kite with its string cut, blood spurting from his mouth. Then with indescribable speed, Meng Hao shot toward Xiao Luo and extended his finger toward his forehead, killing intent roiling. Xiao Luo's eyes went wide, and his heart was trembling. In this moment of deadly crisis, he bit the tip of his tongue, burning some of his essence blood and longevity to unleash a forbidden magic. Time to risk it all, he cried, yin moon severing. A crescent moon appeared on his forehead, which rapidly transformed into a black-colored moon that shot toward Meng Hao in a slashing motion. Meng Hao's eyes widened as the moon closed in on him. Suddenly, his Dharma idol appeared behind him, and its fist shot out to meet the incoming yin moon. A huge boom rang out, and a tremor ran through Meng Hao as the yin moon exploded. Blood oozed out of Xiao Luo's mouth, but he used the short moment of freedom to shoot backward. Face twisted with unprecedented bitterness, he let out a shout. 9 corpses demon transformation, he cried. Immediately, the 9 corpses that had continuously been behind Meng Hao and unable to even touch him, trembled violently. Instantly, long black fur grew out of their bodies, and their appearance became even more ferocious than before. Furthermore, demonic qi surged within them, although that was something nobody would be able to detect. As the demonic qi surged, the 9 corpses, cultivation bases rose dramatically. Instantly, they were comparable to false immortals. 9 false immortals. This was Xiao Luo's trump card that he had originally hoped to use to secure first place. It was not something he would casually unleash, but he had been forced into a corner, and therefore, in the frenzy of this fight, he didn't hesitate at all. Die, he roared as the 9 false immortal corpses bore down on Meng Hao. One by one, they lashed out with astonishing attacks that caused the crowds out in the 9th mountain to reel in shock. Heavens, that's false immortal energy. What magical technique is that? He gave those 9 corpses the powers of false immortality. Xiao Luo didn't even use that divine ability in his fight with Fan Donger. As the outside crowds were in a commotion, the 9 corpses closed in on Meng Hao, bursting with explosive energy. As for Meng Hao, an odd expression crossed his face. Demons, he thought, his facial expression quickly returning to normal. His right hand suddenly rose into the air, and he performed an incantation gesture. The art of righteous bestowal was unleashed. This art was different than the 8th hex and was designed specifically for subduing demons. No one got any special feeling when Meng Hao unleashed the art. However, as soon as his hand lowered, the 9 corpses suddenly stopped in place and trembled. Their previously blank eyes then glowed with bright light. Xiao Luo's face fell completely, and he retreated in astonishment. frantically performing incantation gestures in an attempt to regain control of the 9 corpses. However, it was at this point that Meng Hao extended his right hand. A strange light showed in his eyes as, under the cover of the transformative powers of the Black Feather, he unleashed the 7th demon sealing hex, karmic hexing. Rumbling filled the air as the karma threads connecting the 9 corpses to Xiao Luo separated. As that happened, the corpses trembled even more violently, and explosive death auras radiated out of them. Then they toppled over onto their faces. Xiao Luo was trembling, and he coughed up 9 successive mouthfuls of blood. From the look on his face, he was gobsmacked. He stared at Meng Hao for a moment, shaking violently. "I concede," he yelled, fearful of losing his life in this place. As soon as the words left his mouth, he was surrounded by flickering lights and then vanished. Meng Hao's expression was unchanged as he picked up his spear and walked off to the side. He stood there, his energy surging, the focus of attention of all eyes in the 9th mountain and sea. 3 fights, 3 wins. There's one more fight, but Fang Mu is definitely in the semifinals. Not even Xiao Luo was a match for him. From the look of things, Fang Mu hasn't even used all of his power yet. Just how strong is he? /expand. When Meng Hao attacked, the white-robed woman floating in midair outside of the Dao tree looked at him calmly for a moment, although no onlooker would notice that fact, not even Meng Hao. Xiao Luo reappeared on another leaf, his entire body shaking as he looked back at Meng Hao with terror and astonishment. Before their battle, he had been aware that Meng Hao was powerful, but he had never imagined that he would only be able to defend and would be incapable of fighting back against him. He had even burned some of his longevity and used his 9 corpses demon transformation, explosively increasing their cultivation bases to be similar to false immortals. And yet, his opponent had then unleashed some unknown divine ability to cause his 9 corpses to stop in mid-flight and even sever their connection to him. As he thought about it, Xiao Luo took a deep breath. This was the first time he had ever truly been afraid of another person. "He's somebody I can't ever provoke. If I ever meet him again, I'll simply flee. His magical technique can inhibit my Tao." Xiao Luo took another deep breath as he looked at Meng Hao. Intense terror filled his heart, and he rejoiced at his decision to concede when he did. If he hadn't, he himself might be a corpse now. Meng Hao finished his match. Zhao Yifan also secured another victory. After that, the 4th battle began. Meng Hao stood as usual on his leaf. From the very beginning to now, he had not moved to the loser's bracket. There was only one other among the top 4 who had done the same, and that was Zhao Yifan. Even Fan Donger had been defeated by none other than Zai Yixian from the Burning Incense Stick Society. That match garnered quite a bit of attention and caused Zai Yixian to suddenly rise up abruptly in the eyes of the onlookers. The bizarre Qian Duojiu ended up being defeated by Li Linger, whose magical techniques were somewhat effective at counteracting the old man. However, in the very end, it was difficult to say who won and who lost. Li Linger earned her victory mostly due to luck. As of this moment, Meng Hao and Zhao Yifan were certain to enter the semifinals, but as for everyone else, it was hard to say. Meng Hao's opponent in the 4th battle was the chosen who had beaten Fan Donger, Zai Yixian from the Burning Incense Stick Society. As soon as he emerged from the glittering light to stand in front of Meng Hao, his eyes gleamed seriously. Of all the people who made it to the top 8, he truly feared 3 of them. One was the spectacular Zhao Yifan, the other was the talkative Qian Duojiu, and the last was none other than this Fang Mu. "I am Zai Yixian from the Burning Incense Stick Society. Fellow Taoist Fang, please give me some fighting tips." Having said this, Zai Yixian suddenly sat down cross-legged and performed an incantation gesture with his right hand. Immediately, a copper furnace appeared in front of him. Stuck into the very top of the copper furnace was an incense stick. As the incense stick burned, streams of smoke curled up into the air to surround Zai Yixian, obscuring him slightly. "Fellow Taoist Fang, my magical technique is different from the kind you've seen before. If you can stand up to it for the amount of time it takes this incense stick to burn, then I will concede." Meng Hao stood in place, his expression unchanged. He had been paying close attention to how Zai Yixian fought. Right now, Meng Hao didn't even speak. He took a step forward, and then suddenly everything around him distorted, and instantly the arena was gone. In its place, a boundless land stretched in front of Meng Hao. Countless cities appeared dotting the land, and within each one was an enormous statue. If you looked closely, you would see that the statues depicted none other than Zai Yixian. Meng Hao's eyes glittered. At this point, a majestic voice rang out throughout the world. The heavens are grand, the earth majestic. As soon as the voice echoed out, the statues of Zai Yixian trembled and opened their eyes, almost as if they were coming to life. They flew up into the air, a total of 9,000 of them, which then circulated around Meng Hao and emanate radiant light. In a short moment, the statues merged together into one. They became a lifelike Zai Yixian. He hovered there in midair, smiling slightly at Meng Hao. The heavens are grand, and the earth is majestic, but the greatest of all is the host of all living things. Living things possess desire. Desire becomes thought. Thought becomes burning incense. Worship the gods, pray for their blessing. Through the cultivation of this burning incense, if they worship me, then I am a god. If they pray to me, I am a god. This place is my burning incense world. Here, I am a god, and in this place I cannot be defeated. If I say that a single breath will last for 10,000 years, then 10,000 years that breath shall last. Fellow Taoist Fang, you have a monstrous cultivation base and shocking divine sense. Willpower and determination like yours is something I rarely see. Why not become my follower here? Become part of my burning incense flock. Cultivate the Tao of burning incense. Then one day, you too can be a god. Zai Yixian's words were spoken indifferently, but seemed to contain a bizarre power. As they echoed out into Meng Hao's ears, he felt his mind trembling, as if there was something within the words that made them impossible to resist, and that was forcing him to comply. If I become part of your burning incense flock, how many spirit stones will you pay me per month? Asked Meng Hao coolly. As soon as the words left his mouth, Zai Yixian gaped. After a moment, though, he laughed loudly, then waved his hand. A massive roaring rang out that transformed into a continent of spirit stones. All of the mountains, cities, even the vegetation, turned into spirit stones. Instantly, the entire world transformed into endless, uncountable spirit stones. You can have however many you wish. Meng Hao looked around and then shook his head. I don't want these. I want real spirit stones in the outside world. Zai Yixian's face darkened, and he gave a cold snort. The sound started out light, but then rapidly turned into something that sounded like thunder, echoing out with incredible pressure. It was like heavenly might that crushed down onto Meng Hao. Kneel before me, said Zai Yixian. His voice echoed out shockingly, filled with a will that seemed almost impossible to resist. Meng Hao looked up, his expression unchanged. That's all the pressure you can exert, he asked. Suddenly, he transformed into a vulture that shot toward Zai Yixian. A boom rang out as Zai Yixian's body collapsed. A moment later, he reappeared some distance off. My life force is limitless in this place, he said coolly. You can't kill me. He raised his right hand, coalescing the power of the world into a huge palm that shot toward Meng Hao. Energy raged, and boundless pressure emanated out. Can't kill him, thought Meng Hao, frowning. Is that because the magic is an illusion, or because I haven't affected the essence of his life force? He extended his right hand and made a grasping gesture. Instantly, the blood demon grand magic surged into action. An enormous blood-colored vortex appeared, which spread out to cover Zai Yixian, enveloping him completely. A boom rang out as his body collapsed into pieces. At the same time, another image of him appeared off to the side. But this time, his face was pale and filled with astonishment. What magical technique is that? Ah, so it was because the essence of his life force hadn't been affected. Meng Hao smiled, and then suddenly his hand turned bright red. He flew out, closing in on Zai Yixian. Even as the young man stared in shock, Meng Hao slapped out with his palm. A bang rang out as Zai Yixian once again collapsed into pieces. Actually, his battle prowess wasn't very high to begin with. What was truly shocking was his magical technique. Unfortunately, that magic wasn't very useful on Meng Hao. In the past, whenever someone killed him in this world, he would come back to life. It could happen over and over again, without end, leaving opponents completely dispirited. Now, though, every time he died, some of his life force was drained away. It was something that had never happened to him before, and in his shock, he tried to evade Meng Hao. However, he was no match at all. Were it not for the magical technique he was using, Meng Hao could have killed him numerous times instantly. Rumbling echoed out. Every time Zai Yixian died, one of his statues would shatter. Every time Zai Yixian reappeared, his face was covered with astonishment, and he would instantly fall into retreat. Elder brother Fang, stop. I'll let you out, you can leave. You don't need to let me out, Meng Hao replied calmly. I can get out on my own. With that, he slammed his foot down onto the surface of the ground. A huge boom rang out as his Dharma idol appeared, towering 300 meters into the air, its energy surging. Zai Yixian's face flickered, and he was just about to say something else when Meng Hao suddenly stamped his foot down again. Rumbling rang out as his Dharma idol rapidly grew in size. Now it was 3,000 meters tall. Monstrous energy surged, and the power of a true immortal erupted out. Zai Yixian's face instantly fell as Meng Hao stamped down a third time. Boom! Meng Hao's Dharma idol grew again. In the blink of an eye, it was now 6,000 meters tall, seemingly big enough to prop up the sky. "Tear this place open," said Meng Hao, his eyes flickering with killing intent. As he spoke, he raised both hands high into the air, then slammed them down. Rumbling filled the air as his Dharma idol also raised its hands up, grabbed a hold of the air, and then ripped it in two different directions. Massive, shocking rumbles echoed out. Zai Yixian's face flickered as he performed incantation gestures, causing the world to begin to rotate and stabilize. However, despite his efforts, a massive rift appeared in the sky. The world was being ripped apart. "Impossible," shouted Zai Yixian. "This is my burning incense world. I am God here. Maybe you can hurt my life force, but if I say that nothing can destroy this land, then no power exists that can do so. I'm afraid your cultivation base is simply not high enough," said Meng Hao, his voice cool. He stamped his foot down onto the ground a fourth time, and his cultivation base surged with 80% of an immortal meridian and 80% of the power of a true immortal. His Dharma idol grew again. It was now 12,000 meters tall. It lifted its hands up, then violently ripped at the sky. The earth quaked and bright colors flashed in the sky. A massive rumbling sound echoed out. The rift in the sky opened wider, and an enormous rumbling sound filled the air. Meng Hao's Dharma idol was literally tearing the sky open. As the sky was ripped open, the entire world, as well as Zai Yixian, suddenly shattered. When things grew clear again, Meng Hao was standing in the same place as before in the arena. Zai Yixian was there in front of him. Only about 10% of the incense stick in front of him had burned so far. A cracking sound rang out as the incense stick suddenly collapsed into pieces. When that happened, the smoke dissipated, revealing Zai Yixian sitting there cross-legged. He opened his eyes and coughed up a mouthful of blood. Face pale, he looked at Meng Hao and smiled bitterly. "Elder brother Feng, you are quite powerful, I concede." Even as the words left his mouth, he coughed up another mouthful of blood. Suddenly, a rip appeared on his forehead, a wound that seemed very difficult to heal. It was a Dao wound. The cause of the wound was none other than the tearing open of his burning incense world. This fight had been a very strange one. From start to finish, barely 100 breaths of time had passed, and all the other matches were still in progress. The audiences in the Ninth Mountain and Sea were instantly in an uproar. 4 battles, 4 victories. The last battle seemed ordinary, but actually, the disciple from the Burning Incense Stick Society was in grave peril. A tear appeared on Zai Yixian's forehead. "I heard that if the magic of the Burning Incense Stick Society is broken, it can cause a backlash that will turn into a Dao wound. Don't tell me. That's a Dao wound." Chapter 876, 4 battles, 4 victories. Chapter 877, Unleashed. Everyone watching in the Ninth Mountain and Sea was stunned. Even the patriarchs in the Starry Sky Palace were looking on with surprise. It was clear that the most watched person in this trial by fire and these arena matches was Meng Hao. From the beginning of the trial by fire, all the way to the end of the arena matches, his path had been one of power and prominence. The qualifying matches for the semifinals were still underway. After enough time passed for half an incense stick to burn, Zhao Yifan finished his battle. He easily defeated Xiao Luo from the Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum, who had long since lost his will to fight. His connection with his 9 most powerful corpses had been severed, making it impossible for him to fight for a spot in the semifinals. Zhao Yifan was now the second cultivator to secure a place in the semifinals. Throughout all 4 of the battles he had fought, he never left his arena. He looked over at Meng Hao, who was 2 arenas over, and their gazes locked for a moment. Zhao Yifan's eyes brimmed with the desire to fight, but Meng Hao's expression was calm, and after a moment he looked away. An hour later, the other 2 battles concluded. Li Linger, with 4 battles and 3 victories, had successfully made it to the semifinals. Li Linger had made quite the comeback. She fought her way from the bottom 4 into the semifinals, which caused a big stir out in the Ninth Mountain and Sea, especially in the Li clan, where everyone was very excited. Qian Duoju had also won 3 out of his 4 battles. His only defeat had been at the hands of Li Linger. All of his other opponents had temporarily gone insane to some degree or another. Only Li Linger did not react to his magic at all, which secured her victory. Fan Donger was eliminated. She had been defeated twice, once by Zai Yixian from the Burning Incense Stick Society and once by Li Linger. All of this was a huge blow to her. Her expression was gloomy as she sat there cross-legged on the lowest layer of leaves, staring off into the distance. Mentally, she replayed the various battles she had fought and finally bowed her head. As of now, she understood that the reason for her failures was that her Tao heart had been split. That split was caused by the female corpse. She took a deep breath, after which her expression brightened. This is my personal tribulation, she thought. However, Master said that it's good fortune for me. Therefore, from now on, I won't hide the corpse. I will reveal her for all to see and will not resist her but accept her. As of that moment, the mist behind her vanished to clearly reveal the female corpse. She ignored all the people who suddenly turned their heads to look at her. Her eyes gleamed with determination. In the starry sky palace, the patriarch from the Nine Seas god world nodded his head slightly. From his perspective, this huge defeat for Fan Donger was a good thing for her. The semi-finalists had been selected. These 4 people were the subject of the complete and utter attention of everyone in the Ninth Mountain and Sea. Ling Yunzi glanced cautiously over at the white-robed woman floating above the Dao tree, and then spoke out. You have 3 days to rest, after which we will find out who is qualified to make into the final round. Meng Hao sat there cross-legged, his eyes closed, not speaking. The half-headed man had remained floating near his arena this entire time, staring at Meng Hao, not even blinking. That gaze was enough to cause anyone to feel so terrified that their hair would stand on end. However, after all this time, Meng Hao had gotten used to it and ignored the man completely. A day later, the nascent soul and spirit severing arena matches produced their semi-finalists. 3 days later, the semi-final rounds began. When Ling Yunzi's voice rang out, a buzz of excitement rose up among the spectators in the Ninth Mountain and Sea. There's no suspense at all. Unless Fang Mu and Zhao Yifan fight each other in the semi-finals, then the final match will definitely be between them. You're absolutely right. Li Linger already lost to Fang Mu, so the only person for him to fight is Qian Duojuo. Qian Duojuo's cultivation base is mysterious and unfathomable. That would be an interesting matchup. Well, we'll just have to wait and see how the matches are arranged. As the audiences waited in anticipation, Meng Hao vanished from his spot in the arena. Before he or any of the other semi-finalists reappeared, a virtually imperceptible flicker appeared in the eyes of the woman floating outside the Dao tree. Apparently, that flickering did something to the Dao tree. Moments later, everyone appeared. When Meng Hao emerged from the light, he was just beneath the golden leaf at the top of the Dao tree. The leaf he currently stood on was silver-colored, one of only 2 such leaves on the Dao tree. When Zhao Yifan appeared, the person he found facing him was not Meng Hao. Instead, Li Linger emerged from the glittering light. As for Meng Hao's opponent, it was the crazy old man, Qian Duojuo. These were the exact matchups that the audiences in the outside world had wanted, and the excitement and anticipation was building. Of course, the patriarchs in the starry sky palace noticed that something odd had just happened, and many faces flickered. The old men from the 3 great Taoist societies took deep breaths, and looks of excitement appeared in their eyes. So, she did something to interfere with the Dao tree. That shows that she approves of the competition. Back in the arena, Meng Hao's face was calm as he watched Qian Duojuo approaching. In this group of semi-finalists, Meng Hao and Qian Duojuo had both risen up from through the trial by fire to reach this point. Qian Duojuo looked at Meng Hao silently for a moment, and a bright light appeared coalescing within his eyes. His energy rose up, reaching a level far beyond that which had been seen in previous matches. Not even when he was defeated by Li Linger had he focused so much energy. I am Qian Duojuo. Greetings, fellow Taoist Fang. During this battle, I will use all the power I can muster. I want to take first place, and my only chance to do that is by defeating you. Meng Hao gazed at Qian Duojuo. He had been paying attention to this old man earlier. The fact that he had made his way through the trial by fire all the way to here proved that he was beyond ordinary. That was especially the case considering he had won a victory over Zai Yixian. Although Meng Hao had seemed relaxed in his fight against Zai Yixian, if he didn't have the blood demon grand magic to steal the young man's life force, the battle would have been very difficult. Of course, based on the power of Meng Hao's cultivation base, the burning incense world would not have been able to restrain him forever. In any case, Meng Hao wasn't sure exactly how this old man had managed to win out over the burning incense world. Every person who fought him went crazy, he thought. Even Zai Yixian and the other people he defeated all showed signs of insanity to some extent or another. Meng Hao's eyes glittered brightly. Interesting. Clenching his right fist at his side, he nodded at the old man. Qian Duojiu took a deep breath, and then all of a sudden, his body inflated like a balloon. Cracking sounds rang out as his emaciated frame suddenly bulged with muscles. Instantly, he had grown taller by 2 heads, and his energy surged with power. The sight of it caused Meng Hao's eyes to shine. The audiences in the outside world were shocked. Qian Duojiu had never done anything like this in his previous matches, not even when he fought against Li Linger. Rumble! Qian Duojiu flew into the air with incredible speed, leaving a ghost image behind as he shot forward to appear directly in front of Meng Hao. He sent out a punch that was met by Meng Hao's palm. As a massive boom shook the arena, Qian Duojiu's foot spun through the air toward Meng Hao in a roundhouse kick. Meng Hao's eyes were shining even more brightly now. He didn't retreat, but rather took an exploratory step forward. He waved his hand, causing numerous streams of water to materialize around him, which then formed together into a massive river that swept across the entire arena. A bang rang out as Qian Duojiu fell back. However, he performed an incantation gesture, causing the image of a sun and moon to materialize. They rotated rapidly, creating a vortex that surged toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's expression was unchanged as he transformed into a vulture that charged toward the old man. A look of surprise appeared in Qian Duojiu's eyes, and he suddenly let out a loud shout. Wicked! The word seemed to contain some bizarre power that poured into Meng Hao's ears and entered his mind. Suddenly, his mind spun, and wicked thoughts suddenly rose up unrestrained within his heart. Because of the wicked thoughts, Meng Hao was incapable of maintaining the vulture form, and once again returned to human shape. Qian Duojiu then performed an incantation gesture with his right hand and then waved his finger. Meng Hao snorted coldly and was about to attack when. Wicked! Roared Qian Duojiu. This time, the sound was like a thunderclap that exploded in Meng Hao's mind. Wicked thoughts multiplied in him with an unbridled frenzy. He was incapable of controlling the thoughts, which filled him with a sensation of insanity. Gradually, Meng Hao realized that the devilish will that he had severed during his time of severing the devil and seeking the Tao was now reappearing. Instantly, the devilish will consumed the wicked thoughts. Apparently, the devilish will had been inside of him all along, hiding deep inside of him, sealed away. Now, in response to Qian Duojiu's astonishing magical technique, the devilish will was forming once again. Instantly, Meng Hao and Qian Duojiu exchanged dozens of moves. Qian Duojiu ended up calling out the word wicked 6 times. Each time, it caused Meng Hao's magical techniques and attacks to be interrupted. For the first time in all of his arena matches, Meng Hao was now forced into constant retreat. Blood oozed out of the corners of his mouth, and his eyes were bloodshot. A terrifying aura seemed to be on the verge of being unleashing from inside of him. Qian Duojiu was the one responsible for releasing the devilish will, although he had no idea what he was unleashing. Despite not knowing what he was dealing with, he was still very excited and continued to unleash monstrous attacks. When the crowds out in the 9th mountain and Xi saw what was happening, their expressions flickered in astonishment. Fang Mu is being beaten back. Just what magical technique is Qian Duojiu using to be able to stifle Fang Mu? Could it be that Fang Mu will finally be defeated? As the audiences buzzed in astonishment, Qian Duojiu attacked relentlessly, causing repeated booms to echo about. Meng Hao's face was pale, and his eyes were completely bloodshot, as if he were on the verge of going insane. Blood oozed out of his mouth, and yet, a faint grin suddenly blossomed on his face. You're finished, Qian Duojiu transmitted into Meng Hao's mind, so that only he could hear. My magic can steal good fortune from heaven and earth. It doesn't matter how strong your willpower is, if you have even a scrap of wicked thoughts in your heart, they will be evoked by my magic. When the wicked thoughts explode out, they will cast your body into flames, and you will be defeated. I must use this art on you in order to secure my chance at taking first place. I've been holding back this entire time, and I even let myself be defeated by Li Linger because I was sure I would make it into the semifinals, and I didn't want you or Zhao Yifan to be on guard. The only thing you can blame is your own bad luck, since you're letting Zhao Yifan off the hook by giving him a chance to prepare some defenses. I will unleash all of your wicked thoughts, transforming them into a fire of retribution to burn your soul, to destroy you in body and spirit. Wicked, he roared, performing an incantation gesture and pointing at Meng Hao. This was the ninth wicked. As soon as the words left his mouth, the devilish will inside of Meng Hao surged and was completely unleashed. His eyes were bright red as he was wrapped up in a gloomy, ruthless madness. Deep within that madness was an unprecedented coldness. Black flames leapt from his skin and raged madly high into the sky. However, the flames didn't hurt Meng Hao in the least. He looked up at Qian Duojuo, and a rumbling filled the old man's mind. His face instantly fell. These aren't wicked thoughts. What exactly did I unleash?